Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Midnight Stories. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I thought it would be nice if everyone could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Alright, let's get comfy, relax, and begin. When I was 14, my older brother left for college. He had the top floor of my mom's house all to himself before he moved out. It wasn't a huge house, just a basic two-story place in a quiet neighborhood. Once he left, I got the whole upstairs to myself. It was a big deal for me at the time. I remember dragging my stuff up there, rearranging everything the way I liked it, and feeling kind of grown up. The space wasn't massive, just a bedroom, a small hallway, a bathroom, and a storage closet, but it felt like my own little apartment. The first few weeks were uneventful. I loved the independence. I stayed up late watching shows on my computer, played games with my headphones on, sometimes slept in until noon on weekends. But about a month in, I started noticing little things, sounds that didn't quite make sense. It started small, like footsteps, soft ones, coming from the hallway outside my room. I figured it was the house settling, or maybe something echoing from downstairs. But I kept hearing them, not once or twice, but almost daily. Most of the time, it was just a few slow steps, like someone walking away from my room. Sometimes it sounded like a door shifting slightly on its hinges. You know how, when someone shuts a door in one part of the house, another one might creak from the air pressure? It was like that, but I'd be the only one upstairs, and the door to my room would always be closed. Still, I try to rationalize it. Old houses make noise, I tell myself. There were times, though, when the sounds were harder to explain away, like the nights when I could clearly hear footsteps walking right past my bedroom door. Not creaking, not random thuds, real, deliberate footsteps. I'd pause whatever I was watching, take off my headphones and just listen. I would freeze and wait, holding my breath, sometimes for several minutes, thinking maybe someone had come upstairs, maybe my mom or stepdad. But no one ever did. And whenever I worked up the courage to check, the hallway would be empty, the bathroom light off, everything quiet. I started getting obsessed. Some nights, I'd sit on the floor in my room, next to the door, lights off, and just wait. I'd sit there for hours, hoping to hear the steps, to catch something. But on those nights, nothing ever happened. Then I'd go weeks pretending it was nothing, go to bed with music playing just to drown out any noises. It went on like that for a long time, from September all the way through October. I'd gotten used to it in a way, but then November came, and something happened that I still can't really explain. I've never told anyone about it. That night, I was in bed facing the door to my room. I always slept with it closed. My computer desk was to the left of the door, and the tower had a small blue light on the front that stayed on all the time. It wasn't bright, but it gave just enough glow that I could always tell where the door was in the dark. I remember watching a video before bed, then turning off the screen and rolling over to face the wall. I must have drifted off, but I wasn't fully asleep. You know that feeling where you're not dreaming, but you're not really awake either? In that half-asleep state, I noticed the blue light was flickering. At first, I thought it was my eyes adjusting, or maybe the fan casting weird shadows. But then I realized the flickering wasn't random. It was like something was moving in front of it. I squinted, trying to focus, and then I saw it. A dark shape, tall, solid, standing right between me and the desk. My brain didn't register panic at first. I was just confused. I stared at the shape, trying to figure out what I was looking at. Then it hit me. Someone was in my room. I snapped awake instantly. My body tensed, and I felt this rush of adrenaline flood my chest. My mind was racing. Who was this? How did they get in? Why weren't they doing anything? The figure wasn't looking at me. It was facing the desk, standing perfectly still. I didn't see any details at first, just the outline of a man. Tall, broad shoulders. I couldn't see a face. I decided in a split second that I needed to run. The door behind him was slightly open, and I figured if I could just slide out of bed and lunge for it, I could scream for my mom or just bolt down the stairs. I barely moved, just shifted my waist and slid one foot toward the floor. But the moment I moved, the figure turned. He didn't walk. He just pivoted like he was gliding or floating. But there were no ghostly special effects. Just 1 second he was still, and the next he was facing me. And that's when I realized he didn't have a face. Not like it was covered or hidden. It was just blank. A smooth black surface from top to bottom. Like his whole body was made of some dark, shifting material. I could make out the shape of arms and legs, a head, even fingers, but no details. Like a moving shadow that had somehow stepped out of the wall. I sat up fast, trying to scream, but no sound came out. My body felt like it had been hit with a heavy drug. My limbs were weak and heavy. I was wide awake, but I couldn't move properly. My chest felt like it was being compressed. I tried again to shout, to do something, but all that came out were quiet gasps, squeaks. My throat wasn't working. My arms weren't responding. He was at the edge of the bed before I even saw him move. He reached out a hand, long fingers, almost stretched looking, and placed it gently over my eyes. It didn't feel like a hand, more like a cold wave passing over me. The second my vision went dark, I blinked, and when I opened my eyes again, he was gone. I could move again. I could breathe. My body felt normal. I rolled out of bed and flipped the light switch on so fast, I almost pulled it out of the wall. The room was empty. No one was there, but the door was open, wide open, and that part still messes with me. I remember shutting that door before going to sleep. I always did. It was habit, a comfort thing, and I remember seeing it closed when I was lying in bed. But after whatever that was happened, it was standing open. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in the corner with the light on, trying to make sense of what I saw, but nothing helped. The next morning, I didn't tell anyone. What was I supposed to say? That I saw a faceless man made of shadow, that I was paralyzed and then touched on the face by something that vanished? I kept the door shut every night after that, and I never slept without some kind of light on again. I started locking my door from the inside too, even though the only people in the house were my mom and stepdad. I never heard the footsteps again. Not one more sound from the hallway. That was over 10 years ago. I live on my own now. Different house, different city, whole different life. But I still think about that night. I still sleep with the light on. I still check that the door is shut and locked. Always locked. And I still stay the hell away from the dark. I heard this story from a friend of mine a couple years ago. It wasn't something that got passed around like an urban legend. It wasn't some campfire horror tale. It was something real. My friend told me about this woman, someone his uncle knew well. Not a close friend, but close enough that the story stuck with him. The way he told it, there wasn't anything sensational about it. Just plain facts. That's what made it worse somehow. It wasn't full of drama. It just happened, and no one saw it coming. From what I know, this woman was the kind of person who lived for the outdoors. She wasn't the type to go to bars or spend her weekend shopping. She was strong, quiet, and independent. Liked to hike, camp, be in places where there were no people, just land and weather and silence. She'd grown up with that lifestyle, forest trails, sleeping bags, carrying everything she needed in a heavy backpack. She knew how to make a fire, how to purify water, how to deal with injuries. She was experienced, not some amateur weekend hiker trying to impress people on social media. So it wasn't out of the ordinary when she planned a 2-week solo hiking trip. From what I remember, it was somewhere in South America. My friend thought it might have been the Andes. It was remote, high altitude, not the kind of place you just stumble across. You had to plan for months to get there. And she did. Bought her supplies, marked out the trail, got all her permits. She brought everything she needed: tent, sleeping gear, food, satellite phone, survival tools, and her camera. That camera was important to her, not because she was into photography as a hobby, but more because it helped her document her trips in a way that made them feel complete. She'd take photos of trails, sunrises, rivers, animals, anything that stood out to her. She set out just like she'd done dozens of times before. No one thought twice about it. It was just her doing what she loved. The trip went smoothly from everything I was told. She hiked long days, found peaceful spots to set up her tent, stayed on track with her map. She didn't encounter any dangerous animals or injuries. Weather was fair most days, and when it wasn't, she was prepared. There were other hikers she passed every now and then, but for the most part, she was alone, which is how she liked it. By the time the 2 weeks were up, she felt good. Physically tired, of course, but satisfied. She'd completed one of her most ambitious solo hikes yet. There was a sense of accomplishment in it. Nothing had gone wrong. No bad gut feelings. No missing items. She came back the same way she left, healthy and unharmed. After she got back to the city, she took a couple days to rest. Unpacked, cleaned her gear, checked off her supplies. Everything was accounted for. She dropped off the film from her camera to be developed the old school way. I don't know why she didn't use digital. Maybe she just liked the process of getting film back physically. There's something about holding photos in your hands that makes the experience feel more real, I guess. A week or so later, the photos were ready. She picked them up, sat down at her kitchen table, and started flipping through them. It was mostly what she expected: pictures of tree lines, long stretches of trail, shots of distant mountain peaks. Self-timer photos of herself posing with her backpack, smiling. A couple close-ups of local plants, an animal or two. Then a photo of her sitting by a fire. Then one of her tent under a pale blue sky. And then she found one that made her freeze. It was a photo of her, asleep, inside her tent. It wasn't taken from far away. It was close, almost uncomfortably so, like whoever took it was kneeling just outside the open tent flap. The angle was low, just a couple feet above ground level. She was in her sleeping bag, turned slightly on her side, mouth slightly open. Her arms tucked in like she always slept when she was cold. Her headlamp was hanging on the inside of the tent, unlit. She stared at the photo for a long time, tried to remember if she had maybe set up the camera on a timer by accident. But no, she wouldn't have done that while she was asleep. There was no logical reason for a picture like that to exist. She felt her mouth go dry. Her hands started to shake. She flipped to the next photo. It was another one of her sleeping. Slightly different angle, a little closer. It showed more of her face this time. Her sleeping bag was zipped up all the way to her chin. The tent flap was open a few more inches. The flash wasn't on, so it must have been taken during daylight, but it was still dim. Maybe early morning. She didn't stir in the photo. Didn't react at all. Just kept sleeping. Then another one. This one from the foot of the tent, looking in. Her legs in the foreground, her face in the distance. Whoever took it must have crouched low and leaned in through the tent door. There were 6 of them in total. All of her sleeping. All from different times, different angles. She hadn't noticed anything missing when she got back. Nothing was out of place. No footprints around her camp. Nothing felt strange during the trip. But those photos, those pictures meant that someone had been there. Not just watching her, close enough to reach out and touch her. And she never knew. She contacted the authorities, of course, sent the photos in, told them everything she could remember. But there wasn't much they could do. She'd already been back for a week or 2 by the time she saw them. No evidence, no suspects. No one even knew where exactly along the trail the photos had been taken. They could have been from the first night, or the last, or any day in between. The area was remote, hard to trace. She stopped camping alone after that. Still went out sometimes, but always with a group. Never solo again. And she got rid of the camera. Couldn't bring herself to touch it after that. Just the thought of someone holding it, standing at the edge of her tent, was enough to make her nauseous. That story still gets under my skin. Because it's not dramatic. It's not about monsters or demons or ghosts. It's about something much simpler. Something real. The idea that you can be alone in the middle of nowhere and still not be alone. That someone can be right there beside you, watching you, and you'll never know. That they can come into your space, your tent, your private little world, without a sound, without a sign, and take a piece of you while you sleep. And you'll only find out weeks later when it's already too late. I was driving for Costco a few years back, right before the holidays. Around this time of year, they always send out extra toy shipments to different stores because of the Christmas rush. It was a regular thing. The main warehouse in Indiana would be loaded to the ceiling with everything from bikes to board games. But this time, it was those giant Spider-Man dolls, the ones almost as tall as a kid. They were flying off the shelves in one of the rural Kentucky locations, and late in the evening, I got the call. Dispatcher told me straight up, "You're fast, you don't screw around, and we need this done before morning." I didn't argue. I loaded up the truck, signed the manifest, and pulled out of the dock a little after 2:30 a.m. It was quiet on the road, like it always is at that time. Cold too, probably just under freezing, and you could see the frost building on the sides of signs and guardrails. I got on the 265 heading south and set the cruise. Radio was low, just enough to keep my brain engaged. I had about 3.5 hours ahead of me, maybe a bit less if I didn't run into anything. The first hour was fine. Nothing out of place, just a smooth, lonely drive. The kind where it feels like the whole world is asleep except you and the tires under you. But around 3:45 a.m., I started getting that weird feeling in my chest. Not pain, just a heaviness. Like something was off and I couldn't put my finger on it. The road still looked the same. I was still making good time. I chalked it up to being tired and popped 2 no-dos. I'd used them before, never had any issue. Washed them down with cold coffee I'd left in my thermos and kept on driving. Maybe 10 minutes after that, I started to see the fog. At first it was light, just some patches here and there like you'd expect near a field or a body of water. But then it got thicker, fast, like walking into a cloud. I slowed down to about 40, then 30. I couldn't see more than 10 feet in front of the truck. I turned on my hazards and tried to feel my way down the highway, but after a few minutes, it felt pointless. I was driving blind. Not a single set of headlights coming from behind or ahead. Not even a flicker of a taillight. I couldn't see the lines on the road anymore. So I pulled over on his shoulder, killed the high beams, and just sat there. I figured I'd wait it out for 10 or 15 minutes. I had the time. As long as I rolled in by 7 a.m., no one would say a word. The engine was idling, dash lights glowing softly. It was dead quiet. I didn't even hear any crickets or anything, just the sound of the engine and my own breath. Then the truck just died. Everything shut off. Engine went silent. Dash lights blinked and faded. Even the dome light, when I opened the door, flickered and gave out. I tried the ignition. Nothing. It didn't even click. I turned the key again, same thing. Tried the CB to call dispatch or another driver, but I couldn't get any static, nothing. Grabbed my cell phone, looked down, no bars. Not even one. Just a little red X where the signal should be. I didn't even think that could happen on the interstate. I sat there with my hands on the wheel, heart picking up a little. I wasn't scared yet, just annoyed and confused. I leaned back, closed my eyes for a second, and then I heard it. At first, it sounded like a kid crying. Real soft, like it was far away. Just a few sobs, like someone trying not to cry loud. Then it got a little louder. I froze. It sounded like it was coming from the ditch, maybe 20 feet to the right of the truck. My brain couldn't make sense of it. What kid would be out here in the middle of nowhere at 4 in the morning, crying alone? Then the crying changed. It wasn't a kid anymore. It sounded like a woman now. A grown woman, sobbing real hard, like she'd just lost something. I leaned over to the passenger side, rolled the window down a crack, and called out, "Hello? You okay? Do you need help?" The crying stopped instantly. I waited, hand on the door handle, but not opening it. A few seconds later, I heard something else. Laughter. It started soft, like someone was trying not to be heard. But it got louder, and it wasn't joyful. It was mean, like it knew I was scared. And I'll be honest, I was. That's not easy for me to admit. I'm not a small guy. I've been in fights, I've seen accidents, I've driven through tornado warnings. But something about that laugh made the hair on my arm stand up. It didn't echo like it was coming from the trees. It felt like it was coming from everywhere. I rolled the window back up, locked the doors, even though I'd never done that in my truck before. The laugh kept going, rising and falling like whoever was doing it was walking in circles around me. I didn't see a shadow, didn't hear footsteps, nothing. Just that god-awful laugh that seemed to be laughing at me, not with me. I don't know how long it went on. A few minutes, maybe. I was just sitting there, frozen, watching the mirrors, listening. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Dead silent again. Not a single sound. A second later, my dash lights blinked back on. The radio crackled. The engine coughed and roared to life like nothing had happened. I didn't even touch the key. The fog outside, it just melted. I'm not even exaggerating. 1 second it was thick as soup, the next I could see the stars again. I didn't wait. I threw it in gear and got out of there like the devil himself was behind me. I was going 80, hazard still on, just barreling down the empty highway like my life depended on it. I must have driven another 40 miles before I saw any sign of life. Eventually, I pulled into a truck stop, one of those love stations with a diner and showers and all that. I parked, didn't even do a post-trip check, just went straight inside and beeline to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face, looked at myself in the mirror, and said out loud, "What the hell just happened?" After a few minutes, I calmed down enough to walk into the diner. It was half empty, just a few drivers sipping coffee and a waitress refilling mugs. I needed to talk to someone, see if anyone else had seen what I had. So I walked over to this guy sitting by the window. Looked like he'd been there a while. He had on a John Deere cap, red flannel, worn out jeans. Looked like your average old farmer or trucker, couldn't really tell. I asked, "Excuse me, are you a fellow trucker? I just had one hell of an experience out on the 265. He looked up at me, didn't blink, just said, "Not a trucker, but I know what road you were on." He didn't smile, didn't make small talk, just kept looking at me with that tired look in his eyes. I stood there for a second, unsure what to say. I sat down across from him and asked, "What do you mean?" He didn't answer, just reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded newspaper clipping, and slid it across the table. I picked it up and read the headline, "Mother and son killed in fog-related crash on Highway 265. No other vehicles involved." The date was from 8 years ago. I skimmed it. Said they broke down in heavy fog, exited their vehicle, and were struck by an oncoming semi that didn't see them. The driver had been cleared. Tragic accident. But what caught my eye was the location. Same stretch I'd just been on. I looked up at the man, but he was already standing. He said, "Most drivers don't stop. You did. Just be thankful you drove away." Then he left. I never saw him again. I've driven that route maybe 5 times since. Nothing strange happened. No fog, no crying, no laughter. But I don't drive it at night anymore. And if I see heavy fog, I don't stop. I keep rolling, slow and steady. Because whatever that was that night, real or not, it reminded me of something most drivers forget. The road always remembers. I had been drifting for almost a year by then, maybe a little more. It's hard to keep track of time when you're always moving, never staying in one place too long. I was maybe 17, then already a few months into being on the run. I'd slipped out of a bad foster situation, one of those homes that looks decent from the outside, but turns ugly the second the doors close behind you. I had no plan when I left, just this gut feeling that anywhere else would be better than staying there. So I walked. Sometimes I hitched rides. Sometimes I slept in barns, in the backyards of folks who didn't ask questions when I offered to clean up or help haul stuff in exchange for a place to sleep. Most days it was just me, my backpack, and my legs. That day I was feeling kind of hopeful. I'd found a small job, helping an older lady clear out her shed in town. Nothing special, just a couple hours of organizing and moving things, but it meant cash, and I hadn't eaten a full meal in 2 days. The town was about 8 miles out from where I had last slept, in an overgrown field just off a forgotten stretch of road. I started walking just after sunrise, the air still a little cool, the birds chirping in the distance. The sun kept climbing higher, and by the time I was about halfway, my shirt was stuck to my back with sweat. But I kept going. I didn't mind walking. What bothered me more was always having to look over my shoulder, always listening for footsteps behind me, always keeping my senses sharp, because when you're on your own, there's no one to watch your back. I was maybe 2 or 3 miles out from town when I heard a truck approaching from behind. I moved off to the shoulder like I always did, just in case someone was swerving or distracted. I remember glancing at the vehicle, a dusty old pickup, red maybe, or brown, the kind of faded color that's hard to name. 2 guys were in the front seat. I didn't stare long, but I caught just enough of their faces to notice they weren't smiling in a friendly way. Just one of those feelings that starts crawling over your skin, even before anything happens. The truck passed me, but just seconds later, I heard the brakes squeal. I looked back quick and saw them flipping a U-turn, tires kicking up gravel. They came to a sudden stop on the side of the road, maybe 20 yards behind me. I didn't need to hear the words to know the energy had shifted. Still, I heard them catcalling, laughing, one of them yelling something about how I should come have a good time. I didn't look back. I just kept walking, eyes forward, ears straining. I counted their footsteps. 2 doors slammed. Heavy boots hit the gravel. I heard them spread out, one on each side, like they thought they were being smart, like they thought I wouldn't notice they were trying to corner me. I didn't run right away. I want to be sure. Then it got quiet. Too quiet. I sped up. My heart was hammering now. I took a side glance and saw one of them cutting through the tall grass on the right, the other trying to move around a small ditch to my left. I took off. I don't know if they thought I'd panic and freeze, or if they just weren't expecting someone like me to be fast. But I was. I played soccer before life got weird, and my legs remembered what to do. I ran like hell, arms pumping, breath burning in my throat. I heard the truck roar back to life behind me, tires spinning out on the dirt. They were coming after me. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, praying to whatever might be listening that I'd reach town before they caught up. The trees thinned, and I saw buildings ahead. I kept pushing myself, my muscles screaming, lungs on fire. Just past the edge of town, I spotted a small pediatric clinic. The parking lot wasn't big, but there were a few cars, and by some miracle, I saw a couple, man, woman, and a baby in a carrier, just walking toward their vehicle. I veered straight toward them, legs shaking, heart racing so fast it felt like it might explode. I didn't stop to think how I looked, sweaty, wild-eyed, probably scaring the hell out of them. I just ran to them and pleaded for help, pointing to the truck that had started circling the parking lot like a shark. I could see the hesitation in their faces. I didn't blame them. Who the hell wouldn't be freaked out by a random girl begging for help in a parking lot? But they looked over at the truck, then back at me, and I think something clicked for them. Maybe it was the way I was shaking, or maybe they could see the fear in my eyes. Whatever it was, they opened the back door and let me in. The man got in the driver's seat and peeled out of the lot, muttering something under his breath. The truck followed for a bit, but once we got into the busier part of town, it disappeared. The woman in the passenger seat called the cops and gave him a description of the truck, the men, and what had happened. They dropped me off near a gas station on the edge of town. They didn't ask questions, didn't try to get too involved. I don't think they wanted to know more than they already did. After they drove off, I found a place behind the gas station to sit for a while. I drank some water from a spigot, washed my face in the bathroom, and tried to calm my nerves. The shed cleaning job still waited, and I needed that money, so I walked the last mile into town and did the work. The woman I worked for never asked why I was a bit late or why I looked like I'd just outrun a hurricane. She paid me in cash and gave me a sandwich. I ate every bite. That night, I found a spot behind an abandoned building to lay down. I was sore, dirty, and still shaken, but I was safe. I made it out again. I always had this unspoken rule. Never let the day end with someone else winning. And I hadn't. Not that day. What that couple didn't know, what nobody in that town knew, was that I was technically wanted. Not for any crime, not for hurting anyone, just for leaving the system. Just for deciding I'd rather take my chances out here than stay trapped in a house that made me feel like I didn't matter. I wasn't going back. Not then, not ever. It wasn't the first time I had to dodge people like that, and sadly, it wouldn't be the last. There are men out there who see someone young, alone, and they think that's a free ticket to do whatever they want. But I learned quick. I learned how to read people fast, how to run faster, how to keep my cool even when everything inside was screaming. You don't survive long on your own without learning to listen to your gut. I don't tell this story often, not because I'm scared of it now, but because people either don't believe it or they look at you different when you've seen that side of the world. But for the girls out there walking home alone, sleeping in tents, riding buses with nothing but a backpack and a plan, they'll understand. Always watch, always listen, know what you're good at, and trust yourself when it matters. Sometimes all you've got is you, and sometimes that's enough. I was born and raised in Mombasa, Kenya, and in the 1980s, I was a long-haul truck driver. I used to take goods across East Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, sometimes even Zaire. I'd carry everything from grain to fuel drums, cement to food items. Back then, the roads were bad, the pay wasn't great, and the borders were unpredictable. But it was honest work, and I loved being on the road, far from the heat of the coastal city, the endless roar of the port. I liked the quiet of the countryside, the strange towns, The scent of eucalyptus and dry dust, the sound of frogs and crickets at night when I parked my truck to sleep. In the early 1990s, I got a job hauling construction materials from Kampala to Bujumbura. That meant crossing Rwanda. I didn't think much of it at the time. I had driven that route many times before. The job was routine. Drive into Uganda, spend a night in Kampala, then cross over into Rwanda at Gatuna, and make my way down through Kigali, heading toward the southwestern border. Back then, I'd heard some chatter, just whispers on the road, other drivers saying things were heating up in Rwanda, tribal tensions, local unrest, but we always heard things like that. East Africa was a loud place, full of problems. You learned not to panic every time you heard rumors. The day I entered Rwanda, it was quiet. Too quiet, maybe now that I think back on it. I didn't see the usual villagers along the road. No kids chasing tires. No women walking with baskets on their heads. Even the cows were gone. It felt strange, but not dangerous. I had my permit papers, my ID, my fuel and water, and a well-running truck. I thought I'd be in and out of the country in 2 days. I was somewhere between Byumba and Kigali when I hit a checkpoint. It wasn't one of the regular border posts with uniforms and signs. This one was rough. Just a makeshift barricade of tires and branches with 5 or 6 men standing around holding rifles and machetes. I slowed down, honked twice, and rolled my window down like we always did. They didn't say a word. One of them walked to my door, opened it, and yanked me out. I didn't even have time to grab my papers. Another man climbed into the truck and drove it off to the side of the road. They shoved me into the dirt and tied my hands behind my back. I tried telling them I was Kenyan, that I wasn't from Rwanda, but they didn't seem to understand or care. They just kept talking to each other in Kinyarwanda. They marched me off the road into the bush, maybe half a kilometer into the trees, and there, behind some thorny scrub, was a wire cage. I swear, it looked like something you'd keep livestock in, but it was packed with people. At least 20 of them, maybe more, all sitting on the ground, knees to their chests, silent. When they pushed me in, no one looked up. I remember the smell. Sweat, blood, fear, and something worse, death. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know why they had taken me, why I was in that cage. That first night, they came with torches. About 4 or 5 men with machetes. They unlocked the cage and pulled out 5 people. I watched them beg, struggle, cry. It didn't matter. They dragged them into the trees. We could still see the shadows. The rest of us just sat there. No one made a sound. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even move. In the morning, we got a bit of water, dirty water in a yellow jerrycan. No food, nothing else. I tried to talk to a few of the people in the cage, but they didn't respond. I spoke in Swahili, in English, even tried a little French. Nothing, just empty stares. I started to understand then that they thought I was one of them, a Tutsi, and maybe to them, I looked like one. I had sharp features, a thin face, a narrow nose. It didn't matter that I was Kenyan. In their eyes, I belonged in that cage. The second night, the same thing happened. They came back, chose 5 more, took them into the bush. This time, I couldn't look away. I watched everything, the way they moved, the way the men laughed, how they didn't hesitate. By the 3rd day, I was losing hope. My throat was dry, my hands were swollen from the tight ropes, and my legs had started to cramp. I didn't know how long they'd keep doing it. 5 a night, until none of us were left. That morning, a new man was thrown into the cage. He sat beside me, breathing hard. He had a cut above his eyebrow and dirt in his mouth. I looked at him and, like I'd done with everyone else, asked quietly in Swahili, "Unatoka wapi?" To my shock, he looked up, confused, but he responded. He spoke slowly, said he was from near Jisinyai and had worked with Tanzanian drivers before. He knew a bit of Swahili. Not perfect, but enough. I told him I was Kenyan, a driver. Showed him my national ID. He stared at it for a while. I could tell he wasn't sure what to do, but he nodded. He didn't say much else that day. That night, when the guards came again, I thought that was it. They were going to choose me. My legs felt like water, my heart was racing. But they picked others. At some point in the early morning, before the sun came up, the man who spoke Swahili stood up and went to the edge of the cage. He whispered something to one of the guards. They argued. I couldn't hear what they were saying. Then the guard walked off. A few minutes later, 2 men came and opened the cage. They pointed at me. I thought they were taking me to die, but instead, they cut the ropes off my hands and let me out. I was shaking. I couldn't understand what was happening. The Swahili-speaking man was gone. One of the guards shoved my ID into my shirt pocket and handed me a plastic bag with my truck keys. He said something in a language I didn't understand and waved me off toward the road. My truck was still there, parked under a tree, engine cold. It hadn't been touched much. I climbed in with weak legs and sat there for a long time. I didn't start it right away. I just sat and stared at the steering wheel. My hands were shaking. My clothes were soaked in sweat and dirt. I had bruises on my arms and legs. My lips were cracked, but I was alive. I turned the ignition and drove. I didn't stop until I crossed into Burundi. I didn't eat until I got to Bujumbura, and even then, I barely tasted the food. I took a long bath and threw away the clothes I had worn. I called my employer and told him I wouldn't be finishing the delivery. He didn't ask questions. He just wired me enough money to get home. I crossed into Tanzania a few days later, took a different route through Mwanza, then down through Dodoma and Arusha. I didn't go near Rwanda again, not once. Even years later, when the genocide hit and the whole world saw what had happened, I didn't need the news to tell me. I'd already seen the start of it. I still think about that man sometimes. The one who spoke Swahili. I never knew his name. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he lied to the guards. Maybe he told them I was an international driver. Maybe he bribed someone. I'll never know, but he saved my life. I don't forget that. I still have that ID card, the same one I showed him. It's old now, corners torn, edges faded. But I keep it in my drawer, not because I need it, but because it reminds me of how close I came to disappearing, to becoming just another body in the woods, another story no one would have heard. It happened about 2 years ago, middle of summer, somewhere outside of Oklahoma City. I was parked at a truck stop, not one of the big name ones, just one of those small, beat up ones with a couple fuel islands, a diner attached, and maybe 10 parking spots out back. I got in there around sunset, long day of driving, and I planned to grab a burger, maybe a shower if the water pressure wasn't total crap, and crash early. My next delivery wasn't till late the next afternoon, so I wasn't in a rush. It was hot. That sticky, stale kind of heat that doesn't let up even after the sun goes down. The kind where you step out of your cab and you're already sweating before you hit the pavement. I got my food, burger, fries, big soda, and climbed back into the cab to eat with the curtain halfway shut to block the sun that was still bleeding through the driver's side window. After I finished eating, I saw a guy walking through the lot. Looked homeless, maybe late 40s or early 50s. Hard to tell with all the dirt on his face and his tangled beard. He had this dark green army jacket on, even though it was nearly 90 degrees out. The kind of guy you see at these stops sometimes, usually asking for a few bucks, maybe a cigarette. He wasn't the first, and I'm sure as hell he won't be the last. He came up to my window, tapped with 2 fingers. I rolled it down just a little, enough to hear him, but not enough to give him an opening. He asked if I could spare a few bucks for food. I told him I didn't carry cash, which was mostly true, and then offered him a bag of hot Cheetos I hadn't opened. He looked at it, scrunched his face, said something about how that would tear up his stomach. But he just told me he was eating out of the garbage, so I didn't really know what to say to that. I told him that was all I had, slid the window back up, and shut the curtain fully. Figured he'd move on like they usually do. Not even 30 seconds later, I heard it. A bang. Not soft. A solid, open hand smack right on the back door of the trailer. Then another one. And another. He started yelling. Something about how I shut the door in his face, how I didn't respect him, how he'd never do that to another man. I sat there in silence, heart picking up a little. I reached over and killed the dome lights so it looked dark inside. I didn't want him to see any movement. He kept yelling, fists pounding the trailer. I could feel it shake a bit with each hit. Then he started pacing. I could hear the gravel crunching under his boots as he walked around the trailer, muttering to himself, yelling random things. Most of it didn't make sense. I grabbed my flashlight and unhooked the little latch on the side curtain, just enough to peek out. He was at the back of the trailer now, looking up at it, waving his arms like he was arguing with it, like the metal had talked back to him. Then he grabbed a chunk of gravel and chucked it at the cab. Bounced off the driver's side mirror with a sharp crack. That's when I slipped my hand into the center console and pulled out the .40 I keep holstered in there. I don't usually wear it on me when I sleep, but that night, I clipped it to my belt. Just felt like one of those nights where it might matter. I didn't go out there, didn't open the window, or say a word. I just sat there, holding the gun low in my lap, breathing slow and quiet, waiting for him to get bored or tired or something. Eventually, the banging stopped. A minute passed, then two. I heard something hit the ground, coins, a handful of change, then footsteps walking off, slow at first, then picking up speed until I couldn't hear them anymore. I didn't move for another 10 minutes. Just sat there listening. Every creak of the trailer, every gust of wind through the nearby weeds sounded louder than it should have. But nothing else happened. Eventually, I cracked the curtain open again. I was still. The old diner was dark now. One semi had its engine idling 2 spots over, but I didn't see anyone outside. I stayed up for a while, didn't even try to sleep. I just kept my boots on, back against the bunk wall, gun still on my hip. Around 3 a.m., I finally dozed off, light sleep, but enough to get me through. In the morning, the sun came up angry and bright, and I stepped out to check the trailer. Low bars, chains, spare tire, all still there. Nothing stolen. No scratches, no slashed tires, no busted locks. I walked to the back where he'd been banging, just some smudged handprints and a few small dents that weren't there before. I picked up the change he'd dropped, maybe $1.50 in nickels and dimes. I left it on the pavement. Didn't see him that day, but since then, I've spotted him a few times at different stops. Once in Amarillo, leaning against a dumpster, staring at the ground. Another time in Tulsa, walking along the frontage road near an abandoned gas station. He didn't recognize me, or if he did, he didn't let on. Just kept moving. After that night, I made a few changes. Started wearing the gun on my hip when I park, not just keeping it in the console. I locked the doors the second I shut them. I started picking better lit stops, even if I have to park further out or pay a fee. I check my surroundings before I even step out of the cab. Doesn't matter if it's noon or midnight. It wasn't the craziest thing that's ever happened to me on the road, but it's the one that stuck the hardest. Not because it was violent or because anything really bad happened, but because of how fast it all turned. 1 second, I'm offering a guy a bag of chips. The next, he's banging on my truck like he wants to rip the doors off. No warning, no build-up, just rage out of nowhere. Makes you realize how thin the line is sometimes. How quick something can flip. Out here, most nights are boring. Just you, the road, and the hum of the engine. But every now and then, something happens that makes you sit up and remember that you're alone. That help is a phone call and 20 minutes away, if you're lucky. That night was one of those reminders. And I don't forget reminders like that. It was a story I only heard once, maybe 12 years ago now, and I never forgot it. A buddy of mine, let's call him Jake, told it to me when we were hanging out late one night, sitting around a campfire, just the two of us. We'd been talking about weird things we'd seen outdoors, and after a long silence, he started telling me this story in a low voice. I could tell he didn't really want to talk about it. His tone changed. It was like he had to convince himself it had even happened, but he wasn't exaggerating or trying to be dramatic. I'd known Jake a long time. He wasn't the type to make stuff up, and whatever he saw that day had stuck with him. Even as he told it, he kept glancing into the trees like he was expecting something to walk out of the dark. He only ever told me once and never brought it up again. He said it happened maybe 2 or 3 years before he told me. So this would have been over 15 years ago now. He and a couple of friends had gone out riding four-wheelers one weekend at the St. Anthony Sand Dunes in Idaho. It's this huge expanse of white sand, rolling hills, desert terrain, and these odd patches of wilderness scattered around. It's mostly open, but there are occasional trees or scrubby brush here and there. It's the kind of place where you can ride for hours and barely see another soul if you head out far enough. They've been riding since early in the morning, just enjoying the sun and the freedom. The dunes stretched out for miles, and the air was dry and still. You could see all the way to the distant hills on a clear day. They had a cooler strapped down on one of the quads, packed with water and snacks, and they weren't in any rush. just cruising, climbing hills, coasting down them, sometimes racing each other through the open stretches. There were 3 of them, Jake, his cousin Brian, and another guy named Matt. They'd done trips like that before, and nothing weird had ever happened. Until this one. At some point in the late afternoon, they were taking a breather on top of one of the larger dunes. That's when Jake saw it first. Off in the distance, maybe half a mile away, was a single tree standing on top of a low hill. That wasn't too strange in itself, though it was odd to see one tree growing alone out there in the middle of nothing but sand. But it wasn't the tree that caught his attention. It was the figure standing next to it. He said at first he thought it was someone in some sort of costume, or maybe wearing hunting gear or something. He couldn't tell. The figure was all black, and from where they were, it looked kind of bulky, almost like the guy was wearing a gorilla's suit or heavy winter gear. The sun was behind them, so he couldn't make out any real features. Just the shape of a man, tall, thick, and not moving. He was standing right next to the tree, one hand gripping a branch, just watching them. Not waving, not walking, just staring from a distance. They sat there for a moment, trying to figure out what they were looking at. Jake pointed it out to Brian and Matt, and they all saw it. None of them said much about it, just shrugged it off. Probably some hiker or dune enthusiast out there messing around. They figured maybe the guy had a tent nearby or was waiting for someone. There was no reason to be alarmed, at least not yet. So they kept riding, eventually looping around toward that part of the dunes. It took them a while to get over there, maybe 30 minutes or more. They weren't in a rush, just following the general direction. When they finally crested the hill where they'd seen the tree, the figure was gone. The tree was still there, big, tall, with wide-reaching limbs and thick branches, but no sign of the man in black. That's when things started to feel weird. Jake told me that from a distance, the tree hadn't looked especially large. It looked like one of those short, scrubby desert trees that barely break 8 feet. But up close, it was much taller. Massive, really. Easily 30 feet, maybe more, and the lowest branch was a good 10 feet off the ground. Thick, healthy wood, not dead or dried out. Which was odd, considering it was standing in the middle of dry sand with no other plants around it for hundreds of feet. There was no shade, no underbrush, just the one tree, sitting like a landmark on its own little rise. But what really messed with him was the branch the figure had been holding. Jake said he remembered clear as day. The figure's hand had been resting on one of the low-hanging branches. That's what made him think the guy was just tall, not huge. But now, standing right under it, they realized the branch wasn't low at all. It was over 10 feet high. No normal person could have reached it just by standing there. And the figure they'd seen had been resting its hand on it like it was nothing, which meant either the guy was standing on something or he was ridiculously tall. Not just a tall man, but unnaturally tall. Maybe 7.5, 8 feet, maybe more. And thick, not lanky like a basketball player. This thing had mass to it. Jake said the proportions weren't right. Broad shoulders, thick arms, like something that wasn't built like a normal man. They checked around for tracks, but the sand was too dry and windblown. They couldn't find anything. No footprints, no tire marks, no signs of a tent or tools or anything that might show someone had been camping nearby. It was like whoever or whatever they saw had just vanished. They stayed around for maybe 10, 15 minutes, walking circles around the tree, trying to shake the weird feeling crawling up their spines. Jake said he kept looking over his shoulder, expecting to see the black figure watching them again from another hilltop. But there was nothing, just quiet dunes and soft wind. Eventually, they left. No one said much on the ride back. They packed up and drove home that evening instead of staying another night like they'd originally planned. Jake never told his parents or anyone else. He only told me that one night, and afterward, he brushed it off like it was nothing. But I remember the look on his face when he told it. I remember how he went quiet for a long time after, just staring at the fire. I think what bothered him the most wasn't that he didn't know what it was. It was that it had been watching them, standing out there alone, silent, massive, just watching. Not approaching, not running. Like it wasn't scared of them. Like it had been there before and would still be there after they left. He said he'd never gone back to that part of the dunes again, not even once. And he didn't ride much after that either. Sold his quad a couple years later. Claimed he was getting too old for it, but I always figured it was something else. Something about that day never left him. I've told this story a couple times over the years, but always the same way he told it. No monsters, no aliens, no ghost stories. Just a strange figure standing by a tree where no one should have been able to stand like that. No answers, just questions that don't go away. I've looked into reports of Bigfoot sightings in Idaho since then. People say they've seen things in those dunes before. Huge figures at a distance, weird footprints, strange howls at night. But I don't know. I don't think Jake saw Bigfoot. I think he saw something else. Something we don't have a name for. Something that was real and tall and absolutely not supposed to be there. Whatever it was, it saw them first. And for a moment, it let them see it too. My mother told me this story when I was about 17. She was never one to exaggerate, and she's always been a very grounded person. A strict Christian, the type who doesn't believe in ghosts, spirits, or anything remotely superstitious. If someone tried to bring up paranormal stuff around her, she'd shut it down real fast. That's what makes this story stand out to me. It's something she doesn't talk about lightly. She wasn't trying to scare me or impress me. She told it because it disturbed her, and even years later, she couldn't explain it. And she wasn't the only one who was there. This happened when my mom was in her early 20s. Her grandmother, Florence, was already well in her 80s by then and suffering from pretty severe dementia. She had good days and bad days. Some days she knew who you were. Some days she thought you were someone from the past, or she'd talk to people who weren't there. She lived alone in her old house in a quiet neighborhood. It was a house with thick carpeting, heavy drapes, floral wallpaper, and the kind of furniture that looked like it had been there since the 1950s. The hallway always smelled like lavender powder, and the kitchen clock ticked loud enough to be heard from every room. Her little dog, Fluffy, had been dead for a couple of years by then, but Florence kept the ashes in an urn on the fireplace mantle in the living room. My mom used to visit her pretty often, help her around the house, keep her company. But after Fluffy died, Florence would make her say hi to the ashes every time she came over. She'd pick up the urn, shake it slightly, and say hello to Fluff. My mom said it always made her feel uneasy. She didn't like shaking that urn. The sound of ashes swishing inside was just wrong. But she did it because Florence seemed calmer when she did. It was one of those things you do out of respect, even if it makes your skin crawl a little. Now, my mom's Aunt Lucy, Florence's daughter, was the second youngest out of 5 siblings. She was in her late 50s when she died suddenly of a brain aneurysm. No warning, no symptoms. Just collapsed at work and never woke up. Her death hit the family hard, especially because she was the one who visited Florence the most. They were very close. But when Lucy died, the rest of the siblings decided not to tell Florence immediately. They figured it would be too much for her to handle, especially since her mind was already slipping. They planned the funeral quietly, made arrangements without involving Florence, and agreed they'd break the news to her gently after it was all done. The funeral was held 2 days after Lucy's death. It was a small ceremony, mostly family, a few close friends. They chose an open casket, even though Lucy had apparently mentioned a few times in the past that she didn't like open caskets and didn't want one for herself. She'd said it in passing, not in any official way, and no one had thought to bring it up when the arrangements were being made. It wasn't malicious. They just thought it would be good for everyone to see her one last time. They picked out a new dress for her too, a light blue one with a high collar and lace sleeves. My mom had helped pick it out. It was a pretty dress, elegant but modest. Lucy had never owned it. It had been bought specifically for the funeral. The next morning, they all went over to Florence's house to tell her. It was my mom, her Uncle Mark, and her Aunt Linda. They sat her down in the living room, right across from the fireplace where Fluffy's urn still sat. My mom said Florence seemed more alert than usual that day. She wasn't rambling or confused. She recognized all of them by name, even made a comment about Mark needing a haircut. That's why it hit them so hard when Florence interrupted before they could even say anything. She said, "Lucy was here yesterday." At first, they thought she was mixing things up again. They exchanged looks, trying to figure out what to say. But then Florence kept talking. She was upset, wouldn't stop pacing around the kitchen. Said, "They're looking at me. I don't like them looking at me." She just kept repeating that, over and over again. I told you I didn't want them looking at me. My mom told me that when Florence said that, her stomach dropped. Because that's exactly what Lucy used to say whenever open caskets were brought up. She hated the idea of people staring at her body after she was gone. She used to joke about it. "Close that thing when I die. I don't need a bunch of people gawking at me like I'm some kind of exhibit." It had been said half seriously, but still, the words stuck with everyone. And now Florence was saying them, nearly word for word. Mark tried to redirect the conversation. "Mom, are you sure she was here yesterday? Maybe you were dreaming." But Florence didn't back down. She got annoyed, actually. "She was here," she said. "She walked in through the back door. Didn't even knock. Said she didn't feel right. Said she didn't like the dress." At this point, Linda asked, "What dress?" Florence paused, then started describing it in exact detail. The blue color, the collar, the lace sleeves, the slight shimmer on the fabric under the light. The same dress they'd buried Lucy in. The dress that Florence had never seen. She hadn't been told about it. She hadn't been involved in the funeral planning. She had no way of knowing anything about it. My mom said she felt like the air had gone out of the room. No one spoke for a full minute. Just the sound of the clock ticking in the kitchen and Florence shifting in her seat. My mom looked at Linda, who looked pale. Mark was staring at the carpet. Florence didn't seem to notice the silence. She just went on talking. She looked so uncomfortable in that dress. Said it wasn't her. Said it felt wrong. Then she left. Didn't say goodbye. Just walked out the front door. They didn't argue with her after that. They just sat there, letting her talk, nodding along. When she finished, they told her gently that Lucy had passed, that they'd held the funeral the day before. Florence didn't cry. She didn't ask questions. She just sat there for a few minutes, then looked at the urn on the fireplace and said, "Fluff doesn't like the quiet." That night, my mom couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the way Florence had described the dress, the exact words Lucy had used, the timing of it all. It wasn't just a vague guess. It was specific, too specific. And Florence had been more lucid that morning than she had been in months. My mom said it felt like Florence had been the only one paying attention to something the rest of them couldn't see. She told me this story just once, and she made it clear she still didn't know what to think of it. She didn't believe Lucy's spirit had visited or anything like that. She said, "I don't think it was a ghost. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was something else. But I know what I heard. I know what she said. And I know there's no way she could have known about that dress." Years later, Florence passed away in her sleep, peacefully, in that same old house. My mom kept the urn for a while after that. Said she couldn't bring herself to throw it out or bury it. It sat on a shelf in our attic for years, until one day she quietly packed it into a box, taped it shut, and donated it during a garage clean-out. She never said another word about it. But every now and then, if I pass a shelf with old knickknacks or see a dress like the one Lucy was buried in, I remember that story. I think about Florence sitting in her living room, talking about her dead daughter like she'd just left the house 5 minutes ago. I don't believe in ghosts either, but I can't explain that, and I don't think I ever will. I've lived in these woods for a little over 7 years now. It's just me and my dog, a German shepherd named Duke. I built the tiny house myself. Nothing fancy, just a couple rooms with stove, solar panels, propane for cooking. My property runs right up to a creek, then past that it's just open land. Rolling hills, some rocky ridges, and nothing else for over 100 acres. No neighbors. Closest town's about 20 minutes away if you drive fast. Nights are quiet out here. Real quiet. The kind of quiet where your ears ring until the wind rustles something in the trees and breaks the silence. The kind of quiet where every sound stands out. You get used to it. You learn the sounds, crickets, owls, coyotes, deer moving through the brush. Sometimes it sounds like people talking far away, but it's usually just the coyotes. They have that high-pitched yipping that can almost sound like laughing or crying if you're not used to it. I've never really been afraid out here. I grew up in the woods. My dad used to take me hunting and fishing, taught me how to live out here without being stupid or careless. I've seen bears, a couple bobcats, even a cougar once, but nothing ever gave me that feeling. That gut feeling that something's wrong. Until that one night. It started pretty normal. I'd worked most of the day, splitting wood and checking the fence line near the creek. Some branches had fallen across it during a storm a few days back, so I spent time clearing that too. It was late fall, maybe early November. The leaves were mostly off the trees, and the nights had started dropping below freezing. I made dinner like I always do, just something simple, chili and toast. Fed Duke. He ate like normal. We sat on the porch for a while after that. The stars were out, no clouds, and the air had that cold, sharp bite to it. Duke just lay next to me, ears twitching now and then. I think it was around 10:30 when I heard it. At first I thought it was coyotes. It was this high, sharp sound, kind of like a scream but broken up. It didn't echo like a normal scream would in the woods. It was rough and weak, like it was coming from something already halfway dead. It went quiet for a few minutes, then started up again, then stopped. I figured, okay, maybe coyotes got a deer or a rabbit, and it's just the death throes echoing across the hills. Happens sometimes, but Duke was acting weird. He stood up stiff, tail low, ears back. Not barking, not growling, just alert, eyes locked on the tree line near the creek. I watched him for a minute, then whistled low and said his name, but he didn't budge, just kept staring. I got my spotlight from inside and turned it on, shined it out across the creek and into the woods. Nothing, no eye shine, no movement, just trees and brush. Normally Duke is the first one to take off if there's a raccoon or a possum nearby. He's not aggressive, but he's always curious. This night though, he stayed right next to me. When I got up to go down the steps, he blocked me, not in a loud or dramatic way, just moved in front of me like he was trying to tell me not to go. I'm not a superstitious guy, but when your dog that knows these woods better than most people gets nervous, you listen. I waited a few more minutes. The noise didn't come back. Eventually, I locked the front door and went to bed. Duke didn't follow me to the bedroom like usual. He lay down by the front door, facing it, and stayed that way the whole night. Every time I woke up and looked, there he was, awake, still, staring at the door. By morning, whatever tension had been in the air was gone. The sun was out, weak and low in the sky. Frost on the porch boards. I made coffee and fed Duke. He still seemed a little on edge, but not like the night before. I figured I'd go take a look around, see if I could find tracks or maybe a spot where something had been killed. I threw on my jacket, boots, grabbed the .22 rifle I usually take when walking the back part of the property, and whistled for Duke. He came immediately and stuck close to my side, which was unusual. Normally he runs ahead, circles back, checks things out. We crossed the creek using the old fallen log I keep trimmed for footbridge. Duke didn't hesitate, but once we got across, he started pulling ahead. Not running, but moving fast and steady, like he had a place in mind. We walked for maybe 10 minutes, past the thickets and through the narrow game trails, until we reached the rocky ridge on the far end of the property. It's a steep drop, maybe 20 feet, but jagged rock below. Not something you want to fall onto. Duke stopped at the edge and sat down. Didn't bark, didn't growl, just looked down. I walked up next to him and looked over. That's when I saw him. A man, late 20s maybe, hard to tell. Jeans, hoodie, hiking boots, lying in a twisted position near the base of the rocks. There was blood, a lot of it, dried into the leaves around him. His leg was clearly broken, bent wrong at the thigh, and one arm was twisted so bad I could see bone. He wasn't moving. His face was half covered in leaves, but I could tell it was someone I didn't recognize. For a second I thought he might be dead. Then I saw his chest move, barely, just enough to know he was still alive. I climbed down the safest part of the ridge and made my way over, careful not to slip. The smell hit me before I even got close. Blood, sweat, something else like rot. I knelt down and saw his eyes flutter a bit. He wasn't awake really, just alive in the way a candle is still burning right before it gutters out. There wasn't much I could do down there. I had no cell signal that far back, so I ran back to the house with Duke and called 911. Told them what I saw, gave them coordinates from the GPS, and they sent out deputies and an ambulance with a rescue team. It took them a while to reach the spot. I waited with them to guide them down the trail. A couple of the paramedics said he was lucky I found him when I did. Said if he'd spent another day out there, he'd have bled out or frozen to death. Later on, one of the deputies told me he'd been reported missing 2 days earlier. His car had been found at the trailhead about 3 miles away, up by the highway. They think he came out here alone, maybe looking for a place to die. They found a note in his car. I didn't ask what it said. Didn't want to know. What stuck with me most was the sound. That noise I heard in the night. I realized he must have jumped right around then. Thought the drop was far enough. It wasn't. Instead of dying, he shattered his body on the rocks and lay there in the dark, alone, screaming into the woods, hoping someone would hear. And nobody did, except me and Duke. After they took him away, I walked back out there a few days later. Just to look. The blood was still there, dried into the leaves and dirt. Nothing else. I stood there for a long time, thinking about how quiet it had been that night. How close he was. How long he'd laid there, broken, waiting for something. Anything. I haven't heard that sound again since. Duke still lays by the door some nights. Maybe he remembers. Maybe he doesn't. But now, every time I hear the coyotes, I'll listen a little harder, just in case. I was somewhere deep in the Canadian Rockies that night, long past midnight, probably around 2 in the morning. I had just passed through a small town, don't even remember the name, honestly. It was one of those tiny places with one gas station, maybe a diner, and a few cabins tucked away behind tall pine trees. After that, there was nothing but dark highway for miles. The kind of black that eats your headlights, where the only thing you can see is what your high beams touch. The sky was thick with clouds too. No moon, no stars. Just me, my rig, the empty road, and the hum of the engine. I've been driving for hours and my legs were starting to ache. I needed to take a piss and stretch a little. Thought I'd pull off at the next rest stop, but I didn't see any signs, and by the time I realized I'd probably missed the last one for a long stretch, it was too late. So I figured no big deal, I'll just pull over. The road was deserted. I hadn't seen another pair of headlights in over an hour, and the cell reception had been cutting in and out since I left the town. It felt like I was on another planet. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, flicked on my hazards for good measure, and stepped out into the night. It was cold, the kind of bone-deep chill that sneaks under your jacket and makes your breath fog. I stood there for a second, letting my eyes adjust. Couldn't see much beyond the tree line. Thick, black forest on both sides of the highway. The kind that feels like it's watching you. I took a few steps from the truck and had my piss, looking out into the woods. My breath was loud in the quiet. After I zipped up, I leaned against the side of my truck and lit a cigarette. The glow from the tip was the only light out there besides the faint beams from my truck's headlights pointed off into the road ahead. It was dead quiet. No wind, no animals, no rustling leaves. Just dead silence. I stood there, smoking, trying to relax my nerves a bit. And then I saw movement. It started subtle, like a shadow, shifting between the trees. I thought maybe it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. But then it stepped out of the tree line into the open. A man, just walking, slow and steady, right towards the road. He wasn't running, wasn't stumbling, just walking like he'd been doing it forever. My heart started hammering in my chest. I looked around, hoping maybe there was a car I missed, someone broken down. But nothing. Just me, this guy, and miles of empty highway. I crushed the rest of my smoke under my boot, calmly walked back to the driver's door, got in, and locked the doors behind me. My hand went straight to the gear shift, put in drive, foot hovering over the brake. I watched him in the mirrors and then through the windshield. He kept coming, step after step. He wasn't running, wasn't yelling. Just walked up slow until he was standing right next to my passenger door. Then he knocked on the window. Just one solid knock. My gut told me to drive. Just hit the gas and leave him standing there. But something about the way he knocked, it wasn't aggressive. It was quiet, controlled. So I cracked the window, just a little, just enough to hear if he spoke. He didn't shout or beg. He just said, "I need you to call the cops." His voice was steady but flat, like someone running on empty. I didn't move, didn't say anything right away. My mind was spinning. I asked him why, and he told me. He'd gone out into the woods to end his life. He'd taken a kitchen knife with him, walked deep into the forest, and was ready to do it. But then he thought of his daughters. Thought of them just before he went through with it. And something in him couldn't do it. So he came out looking for help. It hit me like a punch to the chest. I stared at him through the glass. He was mid-30s, maybe early 40s, wearing jeans and a dark hoodie, mud up to his knees. His hand was shaking. There was something in his eyes, like the light was just barely flickering, like he was trying to hold on to the last bit of something inside. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't unstable. He was just tired and broken. I picked up my phone, hoping to God there was signal. One bar. It was enough. I called 911 and explained where I was as best I could, gave them the highway number, the last town I passed, the direction I was headed. The dispatcher told me to stay in the truck, and that help was on the way. They said it might take a while, remote area, few units available. So I stayed in the truck and kept talking to them. The man didn't try to open the door or push anything. He just stood there, cried quietly, not sobbing or wailing, just tears running down his cheeks. At one point, I saw the knife. It was in his pocket, handle sticking out. I told him, gently, through the crack in the window, that maybe it'd be better to leave the knife on the ground before the cops arrived. I didn't want them to panic when they saw him. He didn't say anything, just slowly took it out, bent down, and sat on the gravel. And then he sat on the ground, pulled his knees to his chest, and stared out at the trees. We waited in silence for about 20 minutes, maybe more. It felt like an hour. Then finally, red and blue lights came around the bend in the highway. A cruiser, slow and cautious. They parked behind my rig, lights bouncing off the trees. Two officers got out. One stayed back, hand on their belt. The other walked up, calm and careful. They talked to him, asked him to stand, asked about the knife. He pointed to where he left it. They patted him down, asked if he was injured, and then walked him back to the cruiser. No cuffs, just slow and careful. Before they left, I stepped out and walked over. One of the officers stood between us, but let me speak. I told him I was glad he didn't go through with it. Told him I didn't know what he was going through, but that I was proud of him for walking out of those woods instead of letting them take him. I told him that I hoped he'd talk to someone. That maybe, someday, he'd look back on that night and be thankful he didn't end it. He didn't say much, just nodded. His eyes were red, but the tears had stopped. He looked like someone holding on by a thread, but still holding on. They drove off, just like that, into the night. I never got his name, never found out where he was from. Just a man who walked out of the woods when he didn't want to die anymore. I sat in the truck for a while after that. Didn't feel like driving right away. Smoked another cigarette. Watched the sun start to push the darkness back from the edge of the trees. That was years ago, but I still think about him sometimes. Still wonder if he's okay, if he found help, if he ever told his daughters what happened that night. There's no neat ending to it, no closure, just a moment that hung in time, quiet and cold, on the side of a dark highway. But it stuck with me, not because it was terrifying in the usual way, but because it reminded me that some of the scariest things people face aren't out there in the woods. They're inside, and sometimes, when they choose to keep living, it's the bravest thing they ever do. Back when I was a senior in high school, I had this weekend planned out with my girlfriend, her best friend, and her best friend boyfriend. Just one of those simple, last hurrah type trips before we all graduated and went our separate ways. Nothing fancy or wild. We picked a local campground that was only about 30 minutes from where we lived, one of those places surrounded by thick trees with dirt trails and a lake nearby where people went fishing. There were a few other people around the grounds, but not packed. Each site had a bit of privacy with trees between most of them. It wasn't some deep wilderness place, just a maintained campground where you could set up a tent and drink a few beers without anyone really bothering you. We got there late Friday afternoon, parked my old SUV by the site, set up the tents, and started getting comfortable. The air was warm but not hot. Early summer weather, and the bugs hadn't fully taken over yet. We had one cooler full of beer we borrowed from someone's garage and another with water and some sandwiches. There was a small fire pit and a picnic table, and the site across from us was taken, but we didn't really pay much attention to who was over there. Looked like some guys in their 20s, not old, not teenagers either. Nothing really odd about them. They had a bigger setup, a big tent, a couple tarps up on poles, and what looked like a folding table with a gas burner and all. We figured they were just more experienced campers or something. As soon as the sun dipped behind the trees, we lit the fire and started passing around beers and a small glass pipe. We weren't being quiet, but we weren't exactly screaming into the woods either. Just music from a Bluetooth speaker and the four of us laughing and talking about nothing. Dumb high school stuff. I remember the sky was super clear that night. You could see all the stars since we were far enough from the city lights. The firelight was flickering against the trees, and everything felt relaxed. That kind of comfortable silence when you've known the people you're with for years. A few hours passed like that. We were tipsy, but not sloppy. The pipe went around a few times, and someone got the idea to tell stories, though none of us were really into anything scary that night. Around midnight, I went to grab another beer and noticed that the site across from us was completely dark, like pitch black. No fire, no lanterns, no movement, just nothing. I thought maybe they turned in for the night, but it felt off. When we had arrived earlier, they'd been talking, cooking something, moving around. Now it was like no one was even there anymore. I was about to mention it to the others when I heard something. Twigs breaking behind our site. Not like an animal. These were careful, deliberate steps. Then suddenly, flashlights. Bright beams hitting the trees, moving in a wide sweep around our tents. And not just one or two. I counted at least 6, maybe more. Then men started appearing out of the darkness. Full gear. Vests, radios, rifles, pistols, the works. I didn't know what I was looking at for a second. My brain couldn't catch up. One of the men passed directly by our fire pit. He glanced at us quickly, didn't say a word. Just held up a finger to his lips, signaling us to stay quiet. That's when I realized these weren't random guys or park rangers. They looked military, but they weren't in full uniform. Tactical clothing, dark gloves, some with helmets, others with just ball caps. The guy with the shotgun had an M500 Mossberg. Another had what looked like an M4, and I saw a sidearm strapped to every one of them. They moved quickly, efficiently, like they knew exactly where they were going. Straight across the dirt road, to the site we've been ignoring all night. Within seconds, they fanned out, surrounded the whole camp, and started yelling commands, loud, sharp, authoritative. Everything happened so fast. Flashlights were strobing. I heard someone yell, "Get down," and the next second, I heard shouting and what sounded like people getting slammed into the ground. The guys across from us didn't stand a chance. We didn't move. We just sat there frozen by the fire, staring across the road with wide eyes. It was a full-on raid. A couple minutes later, the guys being arrested were zip-tied on the ground, face down. I could make out 4 of them. Looked like the same ones we'd seen earlier, but it was hard to tell in the chaos. The armed team was sweeping the campsite, opening coolers, dumping out bags, searching the tent. One guy pulled out a small black duffel and handed it off to another with gloves. That one looked like he was in charge. He had a patch that said ATF on his chest. Eventually, a few marked vehicles rolled in, SUVs with government plates, lights, but no sirens. Uniformed officers got out. More talking, more bagging and tagging. One of the men being arrested started screaming something about it not being his and that he was just here for the weekend. He got shoved into the back of a truck. A man, not dressed like the others, eventually walked over to our camp. Clean cut, maybe late 30s, clipboard in hand. Didn't look aggressive, just professional. He flashed a badge, said he had a few questions. Asked if we knew the guys across the road. We said no. He asked if we saw anyone come or go during the evening. We hadn't. Then he asked if we noticed any unusual smells, loud noises, or anything suspicious. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to say too much. I just said we were busy at our own fire, not really paying attention. The guy nodded, didn't press. Took down my name and the others. Said it was routine, nothing to worry about. Then he left just like that. Within the hour, they were all gone. The lights, the trucks, the men in tactical gear. Just gone. The campsite across the road was left wrecked. The tent was slashed open, the table overturned, stuff scattered. It was dead quiet after that. No birds, no wind, just the sound of the fire crackling. We sat there in complete silence for a while. No one said anything. The rush of adrenaline had completely sobered us up. Eventually, someone laughed nervously. I don't remember who started it, but we all joined in. It wasn't really funny, but it broke the tension. We looked at each other like, what the hell just happened? After that, we didn't pack up or leave. We just carried on. The pipe made his way around again, and a new beer got cracked open. I think we all figured if they were gone, then the danger was too. We weren't doing anything violent. We weren't part of whatever that was. Just kids getting a little buzzed in the woods. Later, when we got home and looked it up, we found out the men arrested were all in the Air Force. Some kind of drug operation, cocaine mostly. Apparently, they've been running it through base contacts and using off-base locations for deals and storage. That campsite must have been one of their drop points or something. The FBI and ATF had been watching them for a while and finally moved in that night. We talked about it for weeks. Every time we hung out after that, it came up. Sometimes I wonder how close we were to getting swept up in all that. If one of us had walked over to ask for a lighter or try to bum a cigarette or something, who knows how they would have reacted. We got lucky. Wrong place, wrong time, but lucky. The campsite across the road stayed closed for a while after that. I don't know if it was for investigation or just to keep people away. The next time I went to that campground, maybe a year later, it was open again. Cleaned up, no sign anything ever happened there. But I still remember that night like it just happened. The shadows in the woods, the finger to the lips, the sound of boots on dirt, and the way the air just shifted, how it went from fun and loud to dead silent in a blink. It wasn't some horror movie or ghost story. It was real. And for a few minutes, we were in the middle of something way bigger than we ever expected. It was Christmas break, 2006. I was in my last year of college and working part-time for one of my professors. He was a good guy, a little weird but harmless. He taught environmental sciences and lived way out in the country on this big stretch of land. Horses, trees, ponds, and the kind of quiet that starts to feel heavy when you're not used to it. He had plans to go out of town for 3 days to watch our college football team play in some big bowl game. And he asked me if I could house sit for him and watch his little white dog while he was gone. I said sure. I didn't have any family plans until after Christmas, and honestly, I liked the idea of having a quiet place to myself for a few days. The house was a big 2-story cabin with a wraparound porch, wide windows, and wood everywhere. You could walk out the back door and just see trees for miles. I brought my girlfriend along with me, thinking it'd be a good chance to just hang out, relax, cook meals, maybe drink a little. She was more excited about the horses and the little utility vehicle, this old green gator the professor kept in the garage. There was a little pond we fished at and some trails through the woods. Honestly, it was a great setup. The first 2 nights were completely uneventful. We'd take the dog for walks during the day, mess around on the gator, make food, watch TV at night. It was peaceful. The dog was this tiny, fluffy thing. I don't even remember what breed it was, but it had these beady eyes and yapped at everything. We mostly ignored it when it barked because it barked at its own shadow half the time. But on the 3rd night, something felt different. It started around 9 or 10. We were in the living room watching something, probably a rerun of a Christmas movie. The dog suddenly jumped up and started barking nonstop at the back door. At first, we didn't think much of it. Probably a deer or maybe a raccoon, maybe even a coyote. That part of the country had plenty of those. We got up, checked the back door. Nothing out there, just the yard and the edge of the trees, barely lit by the porch light. I didn't see or hear anything, but the dog wouldn't shut up. So we brought it inside and closed the back door, locking it just to be safe. I kept telling my girlfriend it was just some animal passing through, no big deal. She was a little more on edge than I was. I was trying to keep things calm, didn't want her to freak out over nothing. But after maybe 30 or 40 minutes, the dog started going off again. This time it was at the window on the other side of the house, facing the woods. I went over, pulled the curtain back. Still nothing, just the trees and the dark. The wind was calm, no movement, but the dog kept pacing and barking. I checked the lock on that window and let the curtain fall back. My girlfriend was sitting on the couch, hugging a pillow, clearly freaked. I told her again it was probably just something small. Maybe the same coyote or raccoon had circled around the house. Then she said she wanted to go out and take a look. I thought it was a dumb idea, but I didn't argue. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. I stayed by the door. She came back in maybe 2 or 3 minutes later and said she saw something small and gray dart back into the trees when the light hit it. She was convinced it was just an animal. I agreed, even if I wasn't totally sure. We tried to settle down again, but it was clear neither of us was relaxed anymore. The dog finally stopped barking and just curled up on the rug, still alert but quiet. We decided to call a night and went upstairs to the bedroom. We lay there in bed, neither of us really saying anything. I could tell she was wide awake, and so was I. My ears were kind of tuned in to every creak and noise in the house. Then I heard something. It was very faint. So faint I almost wasn't sure if I was actually hearing it or if my brain was just filling in blanks. It sounded like humming. Not music or a machine, but someone humming a melody. Soft and slow. The kind of tune you hear in a lullaby. It was distant, but clear enough to tell it wasn't coming from inside the house. I held my breath, trying to hear better. It didn't sound like wind or animals or anything natural. It sounded human. I didn't say a word. I just kept listening. Then, without either of us speaking, my girlfriend suddenly pulled the blanket tighter, and I could feel her body tense up next to me. She had heard it too. Neither of us moved for a minute. Then we both got up and started putting on our shoes. No discussion. We both knew we weren't staying another minute. I grabbed the dog. She grabbed her bag. I called a buddy and kept him on the phone while we walked out to my car. I didn't even look back at the house. I just unlocked the doors, got in, and drove. We went back to my apartment in town and stayed there for the night. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing that slow, soft tune in my head playing over and over again. The next morning, we went back to the house to clean up and make sure everything was in order before the professor got home. It was broad daylight, sunny, not a cloud in the sky. I tried to tell myself we'd just spooked ourselves for no reason. Just some animal outside, a weird noise, a coincidence. But when we walked around the house to check things, something caught my attention. In the dirt, just outside the window where the dog had been barking the night before, there were footprints. Not boots or shoes. Bare feet. Small. Like a child's. The prints weren't fresh, maybe a few hours old, but clear enough in the dry soil to make out the toes. They led up to the window, paused there, and then disappeared off toward the trees. There's no reason a child should have been out there. There were no neighbors for miles. No one living near enough to just wander over. And what kind of kid walks barefoot through the woods in December, in the middle of the night? I never told the professor about it. I locked everything up, fed the dog, left a thank you note on the counter, and we left. I didn't go back to that property again. To this day, I have no idea what we heard, but I know it wasn't just in our heads. We both heard it, and I know there were prints outside that window. I've gone camping since then, stayed in cabins, walked through woods at night, but I've never felt that kind of cold in my chest again. The feeling like something was out there, watching. Not an animal, not a ghost, something real. Something with small bare feet and a reason to be standing outside that window, humming a lullaby in the middle of the night. I drive a box truck out in rural Kentucky, mostly hauling feed, fencing supplies, and sometimes equipment for farms tucked way out in the backwoods. It's a lonely kind of job, but I like the quiet. I've got my route memorized by now. Same stops, same long stretches of cracked two-lane roads lined with dying trees and rusting mailboxes. Cell service is spotty at best. You wave at everyone whether you know them or not. I keep a cooler full of drinks in the back seat, a knife on the dash, and a tire thumper behind my seat. That's just how it is out here. You never know when you'll need to clear a branch or deal with something more serious. Just today, something weird happened. I was about 15 minutes outside a town called Liberty. Barely even a town, really, just a gas station, a diner, and a Dollar General. I was headed to a horse farm to drop off some salt blocks. It was about 8 in the morning, and the mist was still clinging low to the road, that kind of fog that makes everything look washed out and quiet. I come around a curve and see 2 black labs in the middle of the road. At first, I just thought maybe they were strays. Not uncommon, but they were going at it hard, teeth bared, snarling, tumbling over each other in the yellow line. I slowed down and crept up behind them, tapping the horn gently. That's when I saw what they were fighting over. One of them had a severed deer leg gripped in its mouth, and the other was trying like hell to rip it away. Not a fresh leg either, fur all matted, the bones sticking out raw and dirty, like it had been out in the woods for a day or two. It was so out of place, so violent looking against the soft fog and quiet woods. I tapped the horn again, louder this time, and finally one of them took off into the ditch with the leg while the other chased after him. I didn't get out or anything, just watched them disappear into the trees. But it stuck with me, that image of two nearly identical dogs fighting like wild things over a piece of dead animal. Felt feral. A few weeks ago, I had another moment that gave me pause. I was making a delivery to a guy named Todd, a farmer with a huge spread of land. His driveway is long, almost a mile, all gravel and potholes, winding through thick trees that block out the sun even during the day. I've been there before, but this time it was almost nightfall when I showed up. Late drop-off. I climbed up the last little hill, just before you reach his barn, and I saw 3 owls sitting on the fence posts that lined the entrance to his property. One on each of the posts, evenly spaced out like someone had set them there on purpose. It was dead, quiet, except for the crunch of gravel under my tires. When I got close enough, they all turned their heads toward me at the same time. My headlights caught their eyes just right, and they lit up like tiny lanterns. Yellow-white reflections that didn't blink, just stared. I'm not superstitious or anything, but there was something real unnatural about it. The way they just sat there, perfectly still, like they were watching me come in. I didn't stop or anything, just kept on to the barn, but I kept my window up even though it was warm out. After I dropped the feed, I came back out and they were gone. Not a feather in sight. The posts were empty, like nothing had been there at all. It didn't scare me, exactly, but it left me unsettled the whole drive back down that long stretch of gravel. But if I had to pick the single creepiest thing I've seen on the job, it happened late last year, during one of my last runs before the holidays. I was driving through a place I won't name, just in case the folks involved are still around. It's not a big town, just a few trailers and rundown houses spaced way too far apart. I was on my way back from a drop, mostly empty, cruising around 40 down a long straight road flanked by dead fields and leaning power lines. It was about 10 at night. No streetlights out there, only the truck's headlights lighting the way. As I passed by one of the old houses I've always seen but never stopped at, I noticed a flicker in my side mirror. Just a little spark at first near the side of the house. Thought maybe someone was burning trash. That's common out there. Then suddenly, flames shot up the side of the house fast, too fast. It looked like someone had doused the place in gas or lighter fluid. The fire just rolled up the wall like it was made of paper. I slowed down and looked back fully in the mirror. The flames were already licking the roof, and smoke was pouring out of the windows. No fire truck in sight. No yelling. Just a fire and one guy standing out in the yard, not moving. I pulled off the road a little way down and watched for a minute, my heart thudding. I wasn't about to get involved unless I saw someone needed pulling out. But then, out of the front door comes another man. Bigger. He had something in his hand. Looked like a piece of lumber or maybe a pipe. He ran straight at the guy standing in the yard and tackled him to the ground. They started going at it, rolling and punching. I could hear the thumps even over my engine. The fire just kept growing behind them, lighting everything up orange and red, casting giant shadows of the two men fighting. Eventually, the bigger guy pinned the other one down, landed a few more hard hits, and then got up and sprinted into the house, still burning. I thought he was done for, but after maybe a minute, he came back out dragging a hose. He put out the fire, not all at once, but enough to keep the place from completely burning down. Took him a long time, maybe 20 minutes. I watched the whole thing from my truck, heart racing, engine running in case I had to drive off. Later, I heard the story from another guy at a gas station. Turns out, the man who set the fire was the younger brother of the guy who owned the house. Meth head. He was trying to burn the place down for insurance money or out of some twisted grudge. No one died, but the older brother beat him up pretty bad and sat on him until the sheriff came. They had to tear the back part of the house down after all the damage. That night stuck with me more than anything else. It wasn't the fire or the fighting. It was that moment of seeing the flames start and grow, with no sirens, no help coming, no one around. Just two men in the middle of nowhere and a fire eating away at what little they had. I still think about what would have happened if the brother hadn't been home. The house would have burned to the ground, and maybe no one would have known why. Driving out here, you see a lot of things that don't make the news. Strange things, sad things, stuff that doesn't seem to bother anyone but sticks with you. Every once in a while, something really bad happens, and it just becomes part of the road. People drive by it like it's nothing, and maybe that's the scariest part. How fast it all becomes normal. The dogs fighting in the mist, the owls watching from the dark, the flames rising in your mirror, and no one coming to stop it. You just keep driving alone, wondering what else is out there waiting past the next bend. We were on a road trip to Florida. My parents thought it would be fun to drive the whole way down from Indiana. Flights were too expensive, and my mom said it would be a bonding experience for the whole family. We packed up our minivan, loaded the back with coolers, snacks, and bags, and hit the highway just before dawn. It was me, my parents, my two younger brothers, my aunt and uncle, their two kids, and my grandparents. 3 cars in total. It was one of those summer trips that felt exciting at first, but after a few hours, your legs started to cramp, your back sticks to the seat, and you just want it to be over. We'd been on the road for almost 9 hours when we crossed into Alabama. Everyone was tired and hungry, so we agreed to stop for lunch. We were somewhere near the state border, some small town that didn't even show up on the GPS properly, just a dot on the screen with no name. My dad spotted a small diner off the side of the road, just a little building with faded white paint and a gravel parking lot surrounded by thick woods. The sign above, it had letters missing, and the windows were covered in sun-bleached paper signs advertising sweet tea and fried bologna sandwiches. It looked old, but not unsafe. Just a typical southern backroad place. Dad and I got out first to go check if there was room for our group. Everyone else stayed in the cars, stretching their legs or using the rest stop next to the parking lot. I remember stepping out into the heat. It was heavy and sticky, and everything smelled like pine sap and hot pavement. When we opened the diner door, a little brass bell jingled above our heads. There were maybe 10 people inside, all locals, judging by the way they were dressed. Men in faded denim, women in floral shirts or aprons. Nobody said anything when we walked in, not even the waitress behind the counter. The whole place just went quiet, like someone had hit pause. Forks stopped mid-air, conversations died off mid-sentence, and everyone turned their heads at once to look at us. It wasn't just a glance. It was full-on staring. Long, unblinking, silent stares. At first, I thought maybe we'd walked into a private event or something, but no one was smiling. No one looked surprised, just blank. Their expressions were cold and fixed, like they were analyzing us. Like they knew right away we weren't from around there. My dad stood still for a second, then took a step toward the counter. He opened his mouth to speak, but stopped when a man near the back, balding, in a sleeveless shirt, shifted in his seat and placed both his hands on the table in front of him. It wasn't threatening, but it felt intentional, like a subtle signal. I looked around the room. Almost every guy there had his hands either balled into fists or resting flat on the table. The women weren't looking at us anymore. They were staring straight ahead, not saying a word. There was something about the air in that room. It was thick, heavy with some kind of tension I couldn't name, like something was about to happen. My heartbeat picked up. I wasn't scared, not exactly. Just uneasy, like being in a place you shouldn't be. Like trespassing. Dad didn't say anything else. He turned, nodded to me, and we both walked out. The moment the door closed behind us, I could hear the sound inside return. Forks clinking, voices rising, like nothing had happened. We didn't speak as we got back to the car. He opened his door and told everyone through the window that we were going to drive a little further and find something else. My mom asked why, and he just said the place was full. Nobody questioned it. We pulled out of the parking lot and got back on the highway. About 5 minutes down the road, I asked my dad what really happened. He glanced at me, then looked back at the road and said, "It didn't like us being there." That was clear. We drove another 30 minutes before we found McDonald's near a gas station. It was bright and crowded with travelers. People laughing, kids running around, employees yelling out order numbers. It felt normal, safe. We sat down to eat, and everyone started joking and relaxing again. But I couldn't stop thinking about that diner. Later that night, when we stopped at a hotel somewhere in the Florida Panhandle, I decided to look up that town. I still remember the road signs we'd passed before taking the exit, so I used those to track it down. It didn't have much online, just a population count under 500 and a few grainy images of a local church and a water tower. The only diner listed didn't have a name, just local restaurant, and no reviews. No phone number, just a blurry photo of the outside, exactly how I remembered it. White paint, gravel lot, pine trees in the background. I zoomed in on the photo. There were two people standing just outside the door. They were facing the camera, not smiling, just standing there, arms at their sides. One of them looked like the bald man from the diner. I tried to forget about it after that. We made it to Florida, had a fun vacation. Theme parks, beaches, the whole deal. But that stop on the way down stuck in my head like a splinter. Something about it felt off, beyond just awkward or unwelcoming. It wasn't like we walked into a place where people didn't like outsiders. It felt more like we stepped into something that wasn't meant to be seen. Like there were rules in that place, and we almost broke one just by being there. When we drove back home a week later, we took a completely different route. No one said it out loud, but I think we all felt the same thing. That town, that diner, we weren't supposed to go back. Years later, I've driven past hundreds of small towns. Places that look just like that one. Quiet roads, diners with hand-painted signs, buildings half swallowed by trees. But every time I see one that looks even a little like it, I keep driving. Doesn't matter how hungry I am or how tired. Some places just don't want to be found. Some places notice you when you walk in, and you don't always want them to. While I was about 12, my family took a summer trip down to Destin, Florida. It was a classic kind of family vacation. Sand, sunburns, way too many people packed into a rental house that wasn't quite big enough, and those cheap beach shops that all smelled like coconut sunscreen and stale air conditioning. I remember the driveway had seashells crushed into the gravel, and the back patio overlooked this brackish little canal that fed into the bay. It was muggy and loud and crowded, but back then, I still liked that sort of thing. Or at least I thought I did. It was one of those days where nobody could agree on what to do. The adults wanted to drink and sit in beach chairs. My cousins wanted a parasail. My little brother wanted to build sandcastles. Someone, probably my grandma, suggested a dolphin tour, those glass-bottom boat rides that take you out into the Gulf for a couple hours. Everyone agreed because it sounded safe and easy and nobody would get sunburned if they stayed under the canopy. The boat looked pretty rundown. It was painted white with chipped blue trim and had that greasy fiberglass smell mixed with salt water. I remember climbing the narrow steps onto the deck, shoes squeaking on the metal floor, and looking down through the glass panels at the bottom. You couldn't see much at the dock, just scummy green water and seaweed swaying like hair underwater. I stood there staring for too long and felt kind of dizzy. Once we pulled away from the harbor, the water turned that weird turquoise color, almost fake looking like the kind you see on postcards. The captain kept pointing his stuff, buoys, birds, other boats, and making jokes on the loudspeaker that nobody really laughed at. People around me were taking pictures, holding their phones out over the railing, and waiting for dolphins to appear. Every now and then, the boat would slow down and people would lean over and whisper that they saw a fin or a splash. At first, I was focused on the horizon, trying not to get seasick, but then I saw something under the glass. At first, I thought it was just a shadow from the boat itself, but it wasn't shaped like the boat. It was wider, more uneven, and it didn't move with us. It just sort of sat there in the water underneath. I didn't say anything at first. I thought maybe it was a rock formation or a school of fish. I tried to tell myself that. But the longer I looked, the more I could see the edges of it. It was huge, way too big to be a fish, way too smooth to be rocks. I saw a flicker of light roll across it, like the way sunlight moves over a whale's back when it breaks the surface. But it didn't come up. It just stayed under, dark and still, like it was waiting. I froze. Every hair on my arms stood up. My mouth went dry. I stepped back and looked around to see if anyone else noticed, but everyone was just talking, taking pictures, laughing. My grandma was eating pretzels out of a Ziploc bag. My grandpa had fallen asleep with his hat tilted over his face. And I was standing there, staring down at this massive, dark shape that seemed to grow bigger by the second. I started to panic. My heart felt like it was trying to punch through my chest. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I thought about sharks. Not just any sharks, but megalodons. Those prehistoric monsters that could bite a whale in half. I had watched a documentary about them a few months before. They had mouths bigger than cars, teeth like steak knives. And that's what my brain latched onto, this idea that there was a megalodon under the boat and it was about to breach, swallow us whole, drag the boat down to the ocean floor like it was nothing. I think I started crying first, then screaming, loud, ugly screams that cut through all the casual noise of boat. My vision went blurry, and I was just pointing and yelling, my voice cracking, chest heaving. I dropped to my knees, still staring through the glass, convinced I was seconds away from getting eaten alive. People came running. My grandma grabbed me, tried to calm me down. My grandpa looked confused and pale. The crew asked if I was seasick. I couldn't explain it. I just kept crying, saying, it's under us, it's right there, over and over again. But when they looked through the glass, there was nothing. Just blue-green water, some seaweed, maybe a jellyfish floating by. No giant shape, no shadow, nothing. I couldn't breathe. I felt sick. They made me sit down near the back of the boat with a cold towel on my neck and a paper bag to breathe into. Everyone kept whispering and glancing at me. I could feel it. I hated it. The rest of the ride was a blur. I didn't see any dolphins. I didn't care. I just wanted off that boat. Back on land, my grandparents took me seriously. Maybe too seriously. They thought it was a breakdown, or trauma, or something worse. When we got back home, I started seeing doctors, therapists. I got asked the same questions over and over. Do you hear things other people don't? Do you ever feel like you're in danger when nobody else is? Do you believe things that others say aren't real? Eventually, they gave it a name, schizophrenia. I didn't know what that meant at first. It sounded made up, something from movies. But over the next few months, everything started making more sense. Or at least I started to understand why things that felt so real to me weren't happening to anyone else. I learned how the mind can play tricks on you, how fear can twist the truth until you can't tell what's real anymore, how sometimes your brain lies. That day on the boat, I was absolutely certain we were going to die, that something ancient and enormous was waiting just beneath us. And that certainty was what scared me most, because even after everyone told me it wasn't real, even after I was diagnosed, even now, years later, I can still picture it. That dark shape under the water, just sitting there. But I also learned how to live with it. I take medication now. I go to therapy. I track my thoughts and write them down so I can catch the ones that don't make sense. I talk to people. I ask questions. I don't let the first reaction I have be the only one I believe. It's not easy. It's never really easy, but it's better. Looking back, I realize I didn't see a megalodon. Of course I didn't. The Gulf isn't deep enough for that. Those things have been extinct for millions of years. What I saw was the start of something I didn't understand yet. A part of me I hadn't met before. Something that was always there, just waiting for the right moment to show itself. And yeah, it was terrifying. It still is sometimes. But at least now I know what I'm dealing with. It's not monsters under the boat anymore. It's just me, my mind. And as long as I keep reminding myself of that, I can handle it. I'm not that scared kid on the glass-bottom boat anymore. I know what's real and what isn't. Most days, that's enough. A few years ago, I went on a camping trip that I still think about more than I'd like to admit. It happened in a town called Gentryville, Indiana. Small place, around 260 people. The kind of town where you pass through in a minute if you blink at the wrong time. I wasn't familiar with it at all, but my friend who grew up around there invited me out for a weekend of camping, and I don't turn those down. I've always loved being outdoors. I enjoy getting away from the noise, shutting off my phone, breathing in air that doesn't smell like exhaust or someone else's microwave dinner. So, when he told me to come out, I packed up and hit the road. It was a long drive. I remember passing mostly farms, woods, a few broken down houses with old cars in the yard. Nothing special. Once I got into town, I followed the directions he gave me to the campsite. We weren't deep in the wilderness or anything. The spot was just off the main road, behind a small, plain white church. The church looked like every other old church I've seen in small towns. Wooden, square, with a simple steeple, no windows lit. It didn't seem like it had been used in years. There were a few gravestones behind it, crooked and worn, but nothing that caught my attention. The woods behind the church weren't that thick either. You could still see some light from the road through the trees if you look hard enough. We set up camp maybe 50 yards into the woods, just far enough in that we wouldn't be seen from the road. There were 4 of us, me, my friend, and 2 other guys he grew up with. We built a fire, cracked some beers, and sat around talking like people do when they're trying to get away from real life for a bit. It was a calm evening, the kind where everything feels easy. The fire crackled just loud enough to drown out the usual sounds of the woods. The sky was clear, and the moon was almost full. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. One of those early fall nights where you keep your hoodie on, but don't need to zip it up. Later into the night, maybe around midnight, I felt the need to take a leak. I let the others know and stepped away from the fire, walking up the dirt road that led back toward the church. I wasn't trying to go far, just enough to get some privacy. I found a spot maybe 20 feet up the path, not quite in the open, but not buried in the trees either. From where I stood, I could still see the faint glow of the fire behind me through the trees. It made me feel grounded, like I wasn't alone. The moonlight made everything around me visible in this pale blue hue. I could make out the outlines of trees, the dips in the dirt road, even some distant branches swaying slightly in the breeze. As I stood there, finishing up, I caught something out of the corner of my eye, a shape that didn't quite belong. At first I thought it was just a tree or maybe a shadow playing tricks on me, but then I looked directly at it. It was standing no more than 12 feet away from me. I don't know how to describe it without sounding insane, but I'll try. The best I could say is it looked like a person, tall, maybe 6'3" or 4", but its body wasn't right. It was dressed in something that looked like metal, but not the way armor or machines do. It was thin, light-looking, almost see-through like reflective foil that had been pressed flat and shaped to fit a body perfectly. No wrinkles, no folds, nothing loose. It clung to it like a second skin. It didn't make a sound. What got me the most was the face. It wasn't a mask. I know it wasn't. The skin was a dull gray, the color of wet ash, and there were deep lines around the eyes and mouth, like someone who had aged badly, but never lost that tightness in their cheeks. The mouth was strange. It pointed downward into a small opening like a slit with no lips. Its eyes were sunken into its skull, large and black. They didn't glow, didn't blink, just stared. It didn't move. Not its body anyway, but the expression changed. It twisted its face slightly, like it was disappointed or angry. That look cut right through me. I felt frozen. Not like I was being held by anything, but like my body just stopped responding. I stared at it. It stared at me. That went on for maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like hours. Then, just as quickly as the fear came, it left. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt calm, like something washed over me, making everything feel okay again. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just turned around and walked back down the path, slowly. My steps felt heavy, but I didn't look back. The woods were quiet. No bugs, no wind, no distant animal sounds. Just a faint crackle of the fire growing louder as I got closer. The whole walk back felt peaceful in the strangest way. I don't know how to explain that part. When I got back to the fire, I sat down on the log I'd been using earlier. My heart was calm, almost too calm. Then, all at once, the fear came back and hit me like a wave. My hands started shaking and my chest tightened up. I looked around at the others laughing about something stupid, and I felt completely disconnected, like I'd stepped out of something I wasn't supposed to see and came back to a world that didn't know. I didn't tell them what I saw. Not really. I just said I thought someone was in the woods, maybe watching us from the trees. I kept it vague because, honestly, I didn't want to be the crazy guy that night. But then my friend, without laughing, without skipping a beat, just asked me, was it gray? That question hit me like a punch to the gut. I said yes, quietly. Asked him why he would even say that. He just nodded and said that once, years ago, he was working on his car in the driveway late at night. His house backed right up into these woods. He said he heard something, looked up, and saw something similar. Said it rushed at him from the edge of the trees, made no sound, and stopped just short before disappearing back into the woods. He never talked about it much after that, and now I understood why. Neither of us said anything else about it the rest of the night. I didn't sleep well. I kept replaying that stare in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face, expressionless at first, then slowly twisting into that disapproving glare. I didn't hear anything else that night, and nothing strange happened after that. The next morning, everything looked normal. The trees, the dirt path, even the spot where I'd stood. Nothing out of place. It was like it had never happened, but it did. Since then, I've never looked at camping the same way. I still go, but I don't enjoy it like I used to. I don't wander off alone anymore, and I don't camp near small towns, especially not near churches that haven't seen a sermon in decades. I don't know what I saw. I don't have answers. I don't want to believe in anything more than people, because people are already complicated and dangerous enough. But I saw something that night that wasn't like anything I've ever known. And even if I try to write it off, that one question from my friend, was it gray, is something I can never forget. I haven't gone back to Gentryville since. I was 14 when it happened, during my Bronze Duke of Edinburgh expedition. If you're not from the UK, DAFI is this program where you volunteer, learn a skill, do some physical activity, and at the end, there's this expedition part. That's the part everyone talks about. You're given a map and a route, and over 2 or 3 days, you have to walk it with your group, carrying your own gear, navigating yourselves, camping overnight, the whole thing. It's meant to teach you teamwork and independence. But no one ever warns you about what can happen out there. Not the weather, not getting lost, I mean real danger. The kind that sticks with you. Our group was 4 of us, me, Josh, Hannah, and Ellie. We weren't particularly close friends, just schoolmates lumped together. It was early summer, but the clouds were heavy and low, threatening rain all morning. The route for that day took us through a quiet, rural bit of countryside somewhere near the border of a nature reserve and some old farmland. We followed a trail through a few open fields, skirted the edge of a sheep paddock, and then found ourselves moving into denser terrain. Lots of thorny bushes, overgrown hedgerows, and a narrow dirt track that looked like it hadn't been walked in a while. You couldn't see much ahead or behind once you were inside. Everything was boxed in by green. No sounds of the road, barely any bird song. Just our boots against the earth and the rustling of leaves. The map said we had to go through that section to cut across to the next checkpoint. It wasn't marked as private land or anything, just a lesser used path. About 10 minutes into this green tunnel of bushes and undergrowth, we came around a bend and saw it. A car, parked up in a small, flattened clearing to the side of the track. It was one of those dull gray Vauxhalls, nothing flashy. The car had all 4 doors shut, but the boot was open and there were 2 men standing by it. The first guy was in a full dark suit, proper smart, black shoes, short cropped hair. The second man was the opposite, slouched posture, gray tracksuit, trainers, hood down. And a third guy, the one I remember the most, was behind the car, off the path just slightly, half shielded by tall grass. He was big, tall and wide with thick arms, wearing a tight white vest and blue work trousers. His head was shaved bald and he had a shovel in his hands. He was digging. We didn't say anything. We were maybe 20 feet away when we first saw them, and all of us slowed down almost immediately. I don't think any of us even needed to exchange looks. Something about the whole setup was wrong. There was no reason for anyone to be there, and definitely not dressed like that. The man in the suit didn't look like someone who went for woodland strolls, and the guy with the shovel wasn't planting trees. When they noticed us, everything changed. The suit guy was talking to the one in the tracksuit. They both had something laid out in the boot. Couldn't see what, just a glimpse of something metallic. Could have been tools, could have been something worse. The digging guy, he froze first. He looked up from the hole, saw us, and just stood there holding the shovel in both hands, breathing heavily. Then suit guy slammed the boot shut, hard, and turned to stare straight at us. All 3 of them were still. No one said anything yet. It was like they were trying to figure out who we were and whether we were a problem. Then the big guy stepped forward, just a few steps toward the path. His voice was loud, thick, low. He pointed the shovel vaguely in our direction and told us to get the fuck out now, or I'll make you. We didn't ask questions. No one said a word. We just moved. Fast. Josh was in front, then me, then the girls. We didn't even wait to see if they were following. I kept expecting to hear running footsteps behind us or a car door slam and the engine revving, but nothing came. Still, we kept going. Even when the thorn bushes scratched our arms and faces, even when the path forked and we weren't totally sure which direction to take. We didn't stop until we were back out into open space, a stretch of farmland with a long fence line and a distant farmhouse. We checked the map again then, hands shaking. I could barely focus. My brain was still stuck back in that clearing. I kept replaying it in my head. The hole, the way the suit guy moved so quickly to shut the boot, the way all three of them looked at us. It wasn't just annoyance or surprise. It was like anger that we'd seen something, like we'd interrupted something important. I didn't want to say it, but I think we all thought the same thing. That hole wasn't for a tree. We made it to our campsite that evening without any more weird encounters, but we were all quiet. Normally, kids our age would joke about something like that, laugh it off, turn it into a campfire story, make it silly. But we didn't. No one brought it up until we were back home after the whole expedition ended. I told my parents the bare minimum, just that we saw some guys in the woods acting weird and it freaked us out. They thought maybe it was people dumping stuff illegally, like rubbish or stolen things. I let them believe that, but deep down, I knew it was more. The size of that hole wasn't for trash, and the way they reacted, the threat, it felt like we had just barely walked away from something way more serious than we were meant to witness. A few weeks later, I tried to find something online. I searched the name of the area, nearby towns, even checked police reports and news articles. Nothing. Not a mention of anything unusual. No arrests, no missing people from that specific week. Either nothing happened or whatever was going on was buried, literally or otherwise. I never did Daffy Silver. I told people I didn't have the time, but really I just didn't want to risk running into something like that again. Once is enough. I've walked through a lot of woods since then, for hikes, for walks with friends, even just to clear my head. But I never fully relax when I'm out in the middle of nowhere anymore, especially when it gets quiet. You start realizing how easy it is for things to happen out there without anyone ever knowing. No cameras, no bystanders, no one to hear you if you scream. Just trees and dirt and silence. And once in a while, even now, I still see their faces in my mind. The coldness, the calmness, the way they didn't panic when we showed up, like they'd done it before, like they knew we'd leave because they knew how to make people disappear if they didn't. We were lucky. That's all I can really say. We saw something we shouldn't have, and we walked away. But every now and then, I wonder how close we really were to not walking away at all. It was 2002, and I was hitchhiking across the US, just wandering around, trying to experience life in a raw, open kind of way. I didn't have a set plan most of the time, but I'd heard about a rainbow gathering happening in the Mark Twain National Forest near Ironton, Missouri. If you've never been to one, they're like temporary communities where people come together to live off-grid for a while. Free food, drum circles, campfires, people sharing whatever they've got. It sounded like something I wanted to see for myself, so I made my way down there. It was late, around 11 p.m., when we reached the state road that led into the forest. I was riding with a couple I'd met earlier that day who were heading in the same direction. We were deep into the woods by then. That road was narrow, lined with thick trees on both sides, and pitch dark once we turned off the main highway. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. We were looking for the stacked stone cairns that marked the turnoffs to the seed camp, but it was way too dark to make anything out, and the road had no lighting at all. Eventually, we decided to just pull over to the side and sleep in the van until morning. I laid back in the back seat, using my backpack as a pillow, staring up at the ceiling of the van. It was quiet at first, just bugs, a distant owl, the usual wood sounds. But sometime after midnight, I started hearing what sounded like kids playing. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then I heard it again. Laughter, running footsteps, the kind of excited squeals you hear on a playground. I sat up a bit, trying to see out the window, but all I could make out were the dark outlines of trees. There was nothing around us but forest. We were miles from the nearest town, and even further from any kind of public park or playground. It didn't stop, either. The sounds continued throughout the entire night. Not just one or two kids, dozens. It really did sound like a full playground at recess. But it never got closer or further away, just stayed there, somewhere beyond the trees. I didn't sleep much. I kept listening, wondering if maybe there was a group camping nearby, but there were no flashes of light, no campfires, no tents. Just that sound. By morning, the couple and I got out and stretched, and the sound was gone. The forest was back to normal, quiet except for birds and wind in the trees. We followed the cairns once we could see them, winding our way deeper into the woods until we came to the seed camp. A few other early arrivals were already there, maybe a dozen of us in total. Everyone was setting up small campsites, digging latrines, gathering wood, and figuring out where the kitchen circle would go. I didn't mention the sounds from the night before. I wasn't sure how to explain it without sounding nuts. Over the next few days, the main gatherings started filling up. Tents, tarps, tie-dye sheets hanging from trees, the smell of wood smoke and lentils and body odor in the air. There were maybe 150 people total at the peak, but the seed camp stage was quieter. I liked being there early, helping set things up, feeling like I had a purpose for once. A few days into it, a small group of us, maybe 4 or 5, went out into the hills to look for a good spring for water and maybe gather more firewood. We spread out a bit, but kept within shouting distance. It was hilly terrain, thick trees, damp undergrowth. At some point, I noticed an unnatural shape through the trees. It was an old foundation, just a rectangle of stacked stone, mostly overgrown. Whatever house had once stood, there was long gone, but the outline remained. I stepped over what might have once been a porch and stood inside the rectangle. There were trees growing where the floor must have been, big enough to suggest the place had been abandoned for decades. Scattered across the area were old planks, half buried in leaves, rotted through. A few rusted nails, bits of metal hardware. Not much else. I called the others over, thinking maybe we'd find something cool. An old bottle, some antique junk. Just scavenger curiosity. We started poking around, and that's when I saw the first kid's shoe. It was a small, black leather thing, like a formal dress shoe from the 50s. The leather was cracked and half swallowed by moss. At first, I thought it was just random trash. Then we found another, then a third. It became clear real fast that this wasn't just a coincidence. The shoes were all children's sizes, tiny sneakers, sandals, those jelly shoes from the 80s, even some that looked hand-stitched, maybe early 1900s. They were all over the place. Some looked almost new, others were little more than fabric scraps and rusted buckles. They were all partially buried, scattered around the foundation in maybe a 25-foot radius. It was like someone had dumped bags of them and left them to rot. And then we found the bags. Half-decayed black plastic bags, torn open by animals or time. Each one filled with more shoes. Hundreds of them, all kid sizes. No adult shoes, no clothing, no other trash. No rusted appliances, no soda cans, no mattress springs like you'd expect from an old dump site. Just shoes. Lots of them. The more we looked, the more it stopped feeling like scavenging and started to feel wrong. I don't know how to describe it exactly, but the whole place felt heavy. Still, like the air had dropped a few degrees, even though it was early summer and humid as hell. None of us said anything for a while. We just kind of stood there, slowly circling the foundation, staring at the ground. Eventually someone said we should head back. No one argued. We didn't really talk about it at camp. It felt like something we weren't supposed to have seen. I kept thinking about how the laughter we heard that first night hadn't stopped. Not once, not even as the hours dragged on. And there was something strange about how it never came closer or faded away. It just existed, right out there in the dark. After the gathering, I hitched a ride with someone heading west and left Missouri behind, but that spot stayed in my mind. A few years later, after I'd gotten access to the internet regularly, I tried to look it up. I searched for anything about missing kids in Iron County, Missouri. Nothing came up that matched what we found. No mass grave, no historical orphanage, no news stories. I even checked maps to try and locate where that foundation might have been, but it was like the place didn't exist. I still think about it. All those shoes, all those sizes and styles from different decades, all those kids. I wonder if anyone ever looked into it. I wonder if someone knew and kept it quiet, or if we were just a handful of early arrival strangers who stumbled into something left behind, something no one wanted to explain. I never went back to another gathering after that. I still hitchhiked for a while longer, but something changed in me after Missouri. I was more cautious, more aware of how quickly the woods can turn strange. And every once in a while, usually when I'm trying to fall asleep in a quiet room, I'll swear I hear it again, just faintly, kids laughing somewhere far off in the dark. I was heading from Tucson, Arizona up to Salt Lake City, Utah, hauling a full load of industrial HVAC equipment. I remember the trip clearly because it was right after monsoon season had rolled through and caused all sorts of damage in the Southwest. A flash flood had taken out part of the main highway. Interstate was completely shut down in northern Arizona and southern Utah. DOT had marked a detour, but it was a weird one, a narrow, winding route that took me way off the beaten path through a bunch of mountain passes in lower Utah I'd never driven before. It was the kind of area where there's no cell service, no radio signal, not even faint static. Just long, empty roads cutting through mountains and scrubland. No gas stations, no lights, no nothing. The sun had already dipped behind the horizon when I got up into the more isolated stretches. I could feel my body starting to drag. I'd been up since early morning, and my eyes were beginning to blur at the edges. I knew I wasn't going to make it to the next town without risking falling asleep at the wheel. So I did what a lot of us truckers do. I found a wide enough shoulder to pull off on and park for the night. It wasn't much of a spot, just a clearing near a bend in the road where the gravel flattened out. No streetlights, no landmarks, just pitch black woods on one side and sheer rocky hills on the other. I killed the engine, checked the locks twice, climbed into the sleeper, and wrapped myself up in my blanket. It was dead silent, the kind of silence that presses on your ears and makes your heartbeat sound like it's echoing in your skull. The kind of silence that doesn't exist in the city or even in the more rural towns. I remember lying there staring up at the ceiling for a while, trying to let the white noise of the truck systems lull me to sleep. Eventually I did nod off, probably around 11 or so. Next thing I know, I'm snapped awake, and it's dark, real dark, like the kind where you can't see your own hand. The clock said it was a little after 4 in the morning. I didn't know why I woke up at first. I didn't have to piss, didn't have a nightmare, nothing like that. I just had this heavy feeling in my chest, like something was wrong. I stayed still for a second, just listening. Then I heard it. Something was playing with the air and power cables that hang between the cab and the trailer. If you don't know trucks, those lines are the lifelines between the tractor and trailer. Air lines for the brakes, power lines for the lights and signals. They hang loose, but not low, and they sit right outside the sleeper wall, maybe 6 inches from where my head was. Whatever it was right there. I heard the soft, rhythmic click and thud of someone, or something, fiddling with them. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal brushing by. This was intentional. It went on for a full minute, slow and steady, like it was being examined. I didn't move at first. I just laid there, trying to make sense of it. My mind flipped through every possible explanation. Animal? Maybe, but not a raccoon or something small. Then the truck rocked. Not a little sway, but a hard jolt like something heavy had climbed up onto the back landing, the metal platform that sits between the cab and trailer. That landing creaked under weight. I've walked on it before. It's sturdy, but it gives a bit under pressure. The whole truck shifted slightly under whatever was back there. I wasn't calm anymore. My heart was pounding so hard, I felt it in my throat. I was thinking bear, maybe a mountain lion, but even then it didn't sit right. Those animals don't go straight for the cables. They don't climb trucks, and whatever this was felt too calculated. I needed to scare it off before it chewed through something important or worse, try to get in. So I took my right arm and slammed it hard into the sleeper wall. Not just a knock, I mean a full force punch. The entire cab echoed with the impact. It hurt my knuckles, but I didn't care. And then I heard it, clear as day. A human scream, a man's voice, yelling out in absolute panic. It wasn't just a yelp or a shout. It was a full-on scream like someone had been electrocuted or surprised at close range. A second later, I heard the thump and scrape of someone falling off the back of my truck. I sat up fast, shoved the curtain aside, and crawled into the front seat. I flipped on every light I had. High beams, fog lights, cab lights, everything. The area around my truck lit up like a stadium. And what I saw made no sense at first. There were people, dozens of them, dressed in full camo gear, rifles slung, gear packs strapped to their backs. Most of them were crouched or diving for cover when the lights hit them. A few stood frozen. They were spread out in a rough perimeter around my truck. I saw one guy limping, holding his leg, probably the one who fell. Turns out, I had parked smack in the middle of a training zone for a unit of Army reservists doing a midnight ruck and capture drill. Their objective? Find and secure an abandoned semi that had been staged a few miles down the road as part of a nighttime exercise. They were given coordinates and a scenario, told that their target was unguarded. Only problem? I wasn't part of their drill. I was just a tired driver who'd unknowingly parked in the wrong place at the wrong time. From what I pieced together later, one of their squads had come up the road, seen my truck, and assumed I was the target. They didn't knock or announce themselves because the drill was meant to be stealth. Their job was to quietly approach, check for threats, and secure the truck. So one guy climbed up to peek inside or disable something, and I scared the absolute hell out of him. Eventually, one of their higher-ups arrived, some guy with a radio, a sidearm, and a clipboard, and everything got cleared up. I showed them my logs, my route, explained that I was just trying to sleep. I was ex-military myself, so I wasn't angry, just confused and running on adrenaline. We had a good laugh about it in the end. They even gave me a couple MREs as a kind of apology, said they'd call it in and make sure no more squads came near me. After that, I couldn't sleep again. I stayed up in the cab, sipping coffee from my thermos and staring out into the dark. Every little noise had me on edge. I didn't move until the sky started to lighten and the shape of the hills came back into view. When I finally pulled back onto the road, my shoulders were stiff and my brain felt like it had run a marathon. I've had mechanical failures, near-miss accidents, even seen some weird things at rest stops, but nothing ever came close to that night. It's one thing to be startled by an animal. It's another thing entirely to wake up to a full squad of camouflaged men swarming your truck in the middle of nowhere. Even now, years later, I double-check where I pull off. I don't care how tired I am. I make sure I'm not near anything that even smells like a training ground. That night stuck with me, not because it was violent or dangerous, but because it reminded me just how much can go wrong by pure coincidence. I wasn't part of their plan, and they weren't part of mine, but for one strange hour in the dark, our two worlds crashed into each other. I was somewhere in Wisconsin, I think. Could have been Minnesota, but I'm pretty sure it was Wisconsin. It was the middle of the night, maybe just before 4 in the morning. I was driving down this 2-lane road, way out between a couple of small towns, the kind of area where there's not much more than fields, patches of woods, and some old barns you pass every few miles. The road was dead quiet. I don't remember seeing another vehicle for quite a while. I had my window cracked just a little, enough to get some of the cool air coming in to help keep me awake, and I had some old country music playing low on the radio just to fill the silence. That's when I saw a set of headlights coming up behind me fast. It was a minivan. No markings or anything, just one of those gray or light blue ones that kind of blends into everything. It came flying past me like I was parked, must have been doing 80 or more. I remember thinking it was kind of odd, that time of night and out in the middle of nowhere. But people drive crazy sometimes, so I didn't think too much about it. Maybe 3 minutes after that, I saw something ahead in my lane. It was just a dark shape at first, and I eased off the gas a little, started watching it close. As I got closer, I realized it was a vehicle. No lights, just kind of sitting there in my lane, and smoke was drifting up around it. I hit the brakes hard and slowed all the way down until I came to a stop behind it. It was the same damn minivan that had passed me just minutes ago. It had hit something head-on. The front end was smashed to hell, and one of the wheels looked like it had come off entirely. The other car looked like a small sedan, was off to the side a bit, but still half in the lane. Both vehicles were mangled up bad. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 right away. I told the dispatcher what road I was on and gave them the nearest mile marker I remembered passing. I stayed in the truck just long enough to finish the call, then I grabbed a flashlight and got out. The air smelled like hot antifreeze and oil, mixed with something that reminded me of burnt rubber. There was glass all over the road and bits of plastic and metal scattered everywhere. My boots crunched over it as I walked toward the wreck. I went to the van first. The windshield was shattered and spiderwebbed, and I couldn't see much through it. I tried the driver's side door, but it was jammed tight. I walked around and shined the light through the passenger window. The driver was slumped forward, both hands hanging down at his sides. Blood was everywhere on the dashboard, on his face, pooled in his lap. His head was cocked back at a weird angle like his neck had broken on impact. I didn't touch anything, just looked. I walked over to the other car, the little sedan. The front of it was crushed inward almost to the windshield. The woman driving it looked older, maybe mid-60s, hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her face was pale. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't moving. Her mouth was slightly open, and there was a thin line of blood that had run down from her nose and dried along her cheek. I checked her neck for a pulse just to be sure, but there was nothing. She was gone too. The whole scene felt like it had just happened. There was still heat rising off both engines, and the smoke hadn't cleared yet. The road was completely silent except for the ticking sound of cooling metal and the occasional hiss from one of the engines. I stood there for maybe another minute or two before I saw the first set of red and blue lights in the distance. Soon after, a few sheriff's cars and a local EMT unit pulled up, followed by a fire truck. They all rushed out and took over the scene. One of the officers waved me back toward my truck, so I went and waited there. After a while, one of them came over and asked me a few questions when I found the crash, what direction I was coming from, if I'd seen it happen. I told them exactly what I saw, and they said both drivers were already gone by the time they got there. Nothing anyone could have done. They had me stick around a while just in case they needed more details. Eventually, they let me go. I eased my truck past the wreck and kept on down that quiet road. I didn't see another car for the next hour, just a lot of empty fields and dark woods. That drive stuck with me for a long time. Still does. I think about how fast that van flew past me. 3 minutes later, it was twisted metal and broken glass. Just like that. That wasn't the only strange moment I've had out on a road. Another time, it was middle of the day, hot as hell, somewhere out on an interstate in Texas. Might have been 10 or maybe 20. The sky was wide open, no clouds at all, just that relentless sun baking down. I'd been driving a few hours already, hauling a load of freight northbound. Nothing special, just a routine haul. I was cruising along when I noticed something on top of one of those big green exit signs. At first, I thought it was maybe a bird of some kind, but it wasn't moving. As I got closer, I saw it was an owl, just sitting there, still as a statue, perched right on top of that sign in the middle of the day. I'd never seen an owl before, not in the wild, and certainly not just chilling in broad daylight next to a freeway. I stared at it as I approached. It didn't budge. Then, just as I got right up to the sign, the damn thing spread its wings and launched straight into the air, right into the path of my truck. There was this loud thump, and then feathers exploded in every direction. My mirrors filled with feathers blowing out around both sides of the cab. I didn't swerve or anything, but the impact startled me. For a second, I thought maybe it was still alive, but after a quick glance in the rear view, I saw it tumbling along the shoulder behind me. Thing flew right into the airfoil on top of the trailer and never had a chance. Don't know why it did that. Maybe it got confused, maybe it panicked, or maybe it was just tired of life. Who knows? All I know is it didn't make it. That drive stuck with me too. You don't expect to see an owl in the middle of the day, and you sure as hell don't expect it to fly directly into your truck. Things happen out here. Little moments like that just pile up in your memory. One of my regular runs back then was from Phoenix, Arizona up into Wisconsin. Always struck me as strange. I'd be hauling these massive barrels of cheese, stacked and sealed and labeled for distribution, headed into a state that's famous for making cheese. Wisconsin importing cheese from Arizona. What the hell is that about? Never made sense to me. I used to joke to myself about it. Like maybe Wisconsin was outsourcing their cheese to Arizona for tax reasons, or maybe it was some weird supply chain quirk. All I know is I'd haul that cheese all the way up through the plains, through Kansas, Nebraska, sometimes straight through Missouri or Iowa, and drop it off just outside Madison or Milwaukee. It was good money and a quiet route, mostly. But those long stretches of highway do strange things to your mind. Sometimes you start thinking about all the little moments, crashes, birds, deliveries that make no damn sense. And you realize just how much of the country you've seen and how little control you have over anything out here. All you can do is keep your wheels turning and your eyes open, because out on the road, the weirdest things don't always make a sound. They just show up, uninvited, and stay with you. I still drive, though not as much as I used to. Those memories come back now and then, especially on quiet nights. That van wreck, the owl, the cheese runs. I never asked for any of it. I was just doing my job, but I remember every detail. A few years back, I was hauling a load of farm equipment through New Mexico, headed south on Highway 491. Most folks don't think much about route numbers, but truckers do. That stretch of highway used to be called Route 666, the Devil's Highway. They changed the number a while back, said it was bad luck that too many people were stealing the signs. I never gave it much thought. Road to road. I've been on it plenty of times, especially late at night when traffic was light and the desert air felt cooler. It was a quiet route, long stretches without another soul in sight. It was around midnight, maybe a little later. I remember the time because I was halfway through my overnight shift, sipping on lukewarm gas station coffee and chewing on sunflower seeds to stay sharp. The desert stretched out on both sides of me, dark and endless. My headlights lit up the blacktop and a few feet of gravel shoulder, but beyond that, it was just emptiness. No towns for miles, no other vehicles, just me, my rig, and the low hum of the engine as I cruised through Ute territory. The stars were out that night, sharp and clear. You don't see skies like that near cities. Out in the desert, it's like the universe is just above your head. I had the windows cracked, letting in the dry night air. The only sound was the tires on the road and the occasional gust of wind hitting the side of the trailer. I was in the zone, not tired exactly, but not fully alert either. The kind of middle state you get after hours of driving, focused but detached. Then it happened. There was a sudden, massive orange flash in the sky. It wasn't lightning. I know lightning. This was different. It was higher up and didn't come with any thunder. It just appeared. 1 second the sky was black, and the next there was this huge orange ball hanging in the air. Way too big for a flare, way too still for an explosion. It was like someone lit the sun on fire and dropped it just above the horizon. I hit the brakes hard. My coffee spilled all over my lap, but I barely noticed. I rolled to a stop right there in the middle of the road. I turned off the radio and leaned forward, staring through the windshield. The thing looked like it was pulsing, like it had depth and texture. It wasn't just light, it looked like fire. You could see the edges of it shifting, almost swirling like slow motion flames. And it was big, way too big, bigger than the sun looks when it's setting. It sat there for maybe 2 or 3 seconds, which doesn't sound like much, but when something that's strange happens, even a few seconds feels like forever. Then just as suddenly it vanished. I don't mean it faded out. I mean it was there, and then it wasn't. Gone. And before I could even process what I'd seen, the whole sky lit up again. This time in a blinding, bright yellow flash that stretched from one horizon to the other. It was so bright it looked like noon. I could see everything. The rocks, the shrubs, the contours of the land around me. My own truck's shadow stretching across the road. It was like a camera flash going off, but massive, like it came from the entire sky at once. And then it was gone too. Just darkness again. The desert went right back to how it was before. Quiet, black, empty. I sat there gripping the wheel, not moving. My heart was pounding, not from fear exactly, but from pure confusion. I didn't know what I just witnessed. I stepped out of the truck, letting my boots crunch against the gravel. The air was still, cold, not a single sound, not even insects. I looked up at the stars. They were still there, just as clear and steady as before. No smoke, no clouds, no evidence that anything had happened at all. I stood there for a good 5 minutes, scanning the sky, turning in circles, listening for anything, helicopters, jets, maybe a rumble of thunder. Nothing. It was like time had reset itself. Like those few seconds were carved out of reality and then covered up. I got back in the truck, locked the doors without thinking, and sat in silence. I didn't turn the key for a long time. My hands were trembling a little, and my coffee was all over the seat, soaked into my jeans. Eventually, I started the engine again and eased the truck forward. I kept my eyes on the sky, but it didn't happen again. No more lights, no more flashes, just miles and miles of road cutting through a black desert. The rest of the drive was quiet, almost too quiet. I passed one gas station around 3 in the morning and pulled in to wash off the coffee and get a fresh cup. The cashier didn't say much. I didn't either. I thought about asking him if he'd seen anything weird that night, but I didn't. I don't know why, but I felt like it was something I wasn't supposed to talk about. Not because it was secret or dangerous, just because it felt personal somehow, like it had only happened to me. For a while after that, I kept checking news sites and weather reports. I figured someone else must have seen it. Maybe it was a missile test, or a meteor burning up, or something to do with the military. But I didn't find a single mention. Nothing. No reports, no photos, no amateur videos. And this was in the age where people post everything online. It was like it didn't exist. I've seen some strange things on the road. I've come across wrecks with nobody inside, abandoned vehicles with the engines still running, strange sounds in the middle of nowhere. But that night on 491 stands out. It wasn't just strange, it was wrong. Somehow, like the world glitched for a moment. I've gone back through that stretch of highway since then, maybe a dozen times. It always feels a little off to me now, like the air's heavier, like something's just out of sight. I keep hoping I'll see it again, just so I'll know it wasn't a dream, that I didn't imagine the whole thing. But it hasn't happened. Just long, empty nights and the sound of tires on asphalt. Sometimes I wonder if I drove through something I wasn't supposed to see. Not in a conspiracy theory kind of way, just something rare. A one-in-a-million thing that didn't leave a trace. I never told my dispatcher, never filed a report. What would I even say? I still think about it when I'm out there late at night, especially in quiet places where the sky looks too big and the road feels too empty. And every time I pass that stretch of desert, I keep an eye on the horizon just in case that orange light comes back. But it never has, and maybe that's for the best. I've been working as a dispatcher for nearly 2 decades now. You sit behind a screen and a phone, and people think you're detached from the real mess out there. But truth is, you see and hear it all. You're the one they call when the worst is happening. And no matter how bad it gets, you have to keep your voice steady, your tone calm, and your focus sharp. Even if someone is screaming into your ear with a gun to their head, or crying because they just saw a human being burn alive. You just listen, you help, and when it's done, you take the next call like nothing happened. It was a Monday morning, cold, gray, and quiet. One of my drivers was set to deliver a load to a Family Dollar store in Detroit. Pretty routine, honestly. We'd sent people there dozens of times, and we all knew the neighborhood wasn't great, but you learn to keep your head down and get the job done. Around 8:47 a.m., I got a call. He wasn't yelling, wasn't panicked, just told me straight he was being robbed. Said there were 3 guys, maybe 4. One had a pistol, another had a tire iron. They'd cornered him and the store manager by the loading dock and told the manager, "Give me the boxes, fat boy," while laughing like it was just another day. They loaded up the back of a beat-up SUV with random crap. Cheap soap, cleaning supplies, some knockoff toys. My guy said they weren't even in a hurry. He asked the manager if he was going to call the cops. Manager just shrugged and said, "Nah, happens all the time." I remember staring at the screen in front of me, trying to process that. It wasn't just a crime, it was how casual it all was. Like it was normal. I told my driver to get in his truck and leave. Didn't argue, didn't ask questions. Just pulled out and drove. He didn't want to wait for the police. He didn't think they'd show up anyway. 2 days later, different driver. Same city. This guy had stopped at a red light. Next thing I know, I'm getting a call from him whispering from the floorboard of his cab. Said he was ducked down, hiding. Some kids were throwing rocks at his truck, yelling slurs at him, calling him a cracker, trying to get him to come out. I told him, "You need to get back in the seat. Put in gear. Get the hell out of there." He didn't say anything for a few seconds, then I heard him grunt, and next thing I knew, the engine roared and he pulled off. Later, he told me one of the rocks cracked his side window. Then there was the Dallas terminal. We had a live feed running from security cams there. One of those spring afternoons where the sky looks like someone's beating it with a hammer. Dark clouds, wind howling through every crack in the building. I was watching the screen when the F5 tornado hit. You don't forget something like that. Trucks, full-size rigs, getting lifted like paper cups. Trailers flipping, metal twisting like it was foil. We lost 3 trucks and a good chunk of the yard in under 2 minutes. No one died, but I don't know how. Guys were shaken to hell. Some of them had to be dug out of crushed trailers. One of the drivers had locked himself in the sleeper and later told us he felt the rig lift off the ground and slam back down like it bounced. He wouldn't get back on the road for weeks. But the story that really stuck with me, the one I still think about more than I probably should, was the one from Edwardsville. We had this driver, quiet guy, never caused problems, always on time, didn't say much beyond what was necessary. Nobody really knew him that well, but he was solid. One afternoon, I got a call from the terminal. A truck had driven straight into the side of the building at full speed. At first, we thought it was a medical emergency, a heart attack, stroke, maybe he fell asleep. But then the details started coming out. He never braked, never tried to swerve. Eyewitnesses said he aimed straight for the building and floored it. He didn't survive. 2 people inside were injured badly. One nearly lost their leg. It was suicide, no doubt. But the intent wasn't just to die. It was to take others with him. I had to pull his record, review his logs, dig through his final hours. He'd made a few unusual stops. Nothing illegal, nothing that flagged the system. Just off, like someone making peace with things. One stop was in the middle of a cornfield. Sat there for an hour, engine off. Just silence. I'll never know what went through his head. Another time, I got a call around midnight from a driver who was on his return leg through I-57. His voice was trembling. He just witnessed a wreck. Bad one. 2 cars involved, one flipped. Fuel tank must have ruptured. There was fire. Big fire. He told me he was one of the first to stop. Tried to run up and help, but he couldn't get close. Heat was too much. Said he could hear them. A whole family. Kids. Screaming. They were burning alive, and there was nothing he could do. By the time the fire department got there was barely anything left of the vehicle. That driver took a week off, then left the industry. Never spoke to him again. And yet, sometimes the randomness of things is what leaves you stunned. One guy was distracted, just missed the brake lights. He hit the back of another truck at 60 miles an hour. Cab was obliterated. You could barely tell it had been a vehicle. Everything had folded inward. Dash, cabinets, roof. The passenger seat was gone entirely. You'd think no one could survive something like that. But he walked away. Not a scratch. He said later he only remembered the sudden jolt and the sound of metal folding. Said it felt like the whole world had exploded around him and somehow missed him. He went back on the road 3 days later. Some people are just built different. I've been yelled at, cursed, blamed. I've had guys call me while being chased, while crying, while bleeding. I've called cops to scenes where I didn't know what they'd find. Sometimes I heard the last words of someone before the phone went dead. People don't get it. They think truckers just drive. But what they do, it's war out there. War against the road, the cities, the weather, the people. Against their own minds sometimes. Dispatchers were the ones in the watchtower holding the radio, trying to keep them alive. I still do it. Every morning I sit down, log in, check routes, plan loads. But it's never just about cargo or mileage. Not for me. Every time a driver calls, I stop what I'm doing and focus. Because you never know what that call's going to be. It could be someone asking if they can grab a coffee. Or it could be someone watching fire swallow a family alive. And I'll be there for both. It was one of those boring Saturdays where I had nothing to do and no one around. I wasn't feeling like watching anything or scrolling endlessly on my phone, so I figured I'd go out for a drive. I had no specific place in mind, just wanted to get away from the house for a bit. The kind of drive where you don't think much, just put on some music, let the road take over, and clear your head. I filled up my car, grabbed a bottle of water, and just started heading out. The city thinned out pretty quickly, and before long I was on some back roads I didn't recognize. Didn't care. That was the point. The roads were old and cracked, lined by trees and thick brush, barely any signs. I passed a few farmhouses, some long stretches of nothing. After about an hour or so, I spotted this dirt road off to the right. It looked like it hadn't been used in a while. No signs, no gates, nothing. Just a single track cutting into the woods. I don't know why I turned in. Just felt like it. Curiosity, maybe, or maybe I just wanted to see where it went. It wasn't muddy or anything, and my car could handle it. The trees closed in quickly, and the road got narrower the deeper I went. The branches scraped lightly against the sides of my car. The sun was still out, but the trees blocked most of it, making everything feel a bit dim. I drove for maybe 10 minutes until the path suddenly opened into a small clearing. There was nothing special about it, just a wide open space surrounded by trees. The ground looked packed, like it had once been used for something. Maybe people had camped there before. In the center, there was this pile of old trash, rusty cans, burnt wood, a few ripped tarps half buried under leaves. Seemed abandoned, forgotten. I turned off the engine and just sat there for a bit, listening to the silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy. I took a sip of water, looked around, and got out of the car. Thought I'd stretch my legs. There was a slight chill in the air, not enough to make me uncomfortable, but enough to notice. I walked around the edge of the clearing, kicking at rocks, poking around the trash pile a little. Most of it looked like it had been there for years. Nothing really interesting. A couple of those little propane cans, the kind people use for camping stoves. One was split open. I backed away from it just in case. Then I saw something that didn't fit. It was this newer looking tarp, dark green and much cleaner than the rest of the stuff around it. I walked over and lifted the edge. Underneath were these plastic storage containers, like the ones you get from Walmart. They looked out of place, too clean, too new compared to everything else. I know I should have just left them alone, but curiosity gets the better of you sometimes. I knelt down and opened one. Inside were Ziploc bags, dozens of them, each one labeled with a date written in black marker. And inside meat, vacuum-sealed pieces of meat, blood still a little visible through the plastic. No label saying what kind, no packaging from any store, just plain plastic bags, lined up carefully. I stared at them for a long time, trying to make sense of it. My brain was working slow, refusing to accept what I was looking at. I opened another container. More meat, same kind of labeling. Some were older, some were recent, just a few weeks back. I stood up and backed away. I didn't know what to do. I remember checking my phone. No signal. Of course, I considered just getting back in my car and driving away, pretending I hadn't seen anything. But then I heard something. Footsteps. Not close, but not far either. From the trees, maybe 20 or 30 feet in. They weren't heavy. Just soft cracks of leaves and twigs, but steady. Someone was definitely walking toward the clearing. I didn't see anyone yet, but I didn't wait either. I rushed back to my car, trying not to make too much noise, and as soon as I got in, I locked the doors and started the engine. I threw the car in reverse and spun around, heading back the way I came. My heart was pounding hard, and I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see someone running after me. But the road behind stayed empty. I don't know how fast I was going, but it felt like forever until I reached the main road again. As soon as I had signal, I pulled over and called the police. I didn't even know what I was going to say. How do you explain something like that without sounding crazy? I just told them what I saw, containers full of meat with dates written on them, hidden in the woods, no signs or house nearby. They told me to stay where I was and send someone out. When the officers got there, I led them back the same way. It was almost sunset by then. I remember the light getting weaker, long shadows stretching over the road. When we reached the clearing, everything was gone. The trash pile was still there, but the newer tarp, the containers, they had vanished. Even the ground where they had been looked disturbed, like someone had quickly dragged things away. The officers looked at me like they didn't quite believe me, but they took a report anyway. Asked me a bunch of questions. What time I'd been there, what exactly I saw, if I touched anything else. They didn't find any tracks, no tire marks, nothing. They thanked me and said they'd look into it, but I knew that was the end of it. They weren't going to do anything. And even if they did, I doubted they'd find anything. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept going back to those containers, to the labels, to the strange silence of that place, and especially to those footsteps. Whoever was in those woods, whatever they were doing, wasn't hunting or camping. People don't pack and label meat like that unless it's for storage, long-term storage. And there was a lot of it. I kept thinking about the dates on those bags. Some went back years. Others were recent, which meant whoever was doing this had been doing it for a long time and was still doing it. Still out there. I try not to think about what kind of meat it was. I never went back there again. Never even tried to look it up or see if the police found anything. I didn't want to know. But sometimes, usually late at night, I wonder how close I came to something bad. If I'd been a little slower. If I'd opened the wrong container. If I hadn't heard those footsteps in time. I don't go for random drives anymore. I used to drive the same route every week from Edinburgh down to London and back again. It was a long haul, 8 to 10 hours depending on traffic, but I got used to the routine. I'd usually leave just before sunrise, stop at the same service stations for fuel and a quick bite, listen to the radio or an audiobook to keep myself alert. You get into a rhythm after a while. The roads almost become part of you. It's boring work sometimes, but every now and then, something sticks with you. Something you can't explain. This one drive, years ago, still creeps into my thoughts when I'm driving late at night. It was early autumn. I remember that clearly. The trees were starting to turn orange, but the days were still long enough that I had daylight for most of the journey. I had a full trailer, electronics mostly, and I was making good time on the M1. Traffic wasn't bad, the weather was decent, and I'd already cleared the A720 and gotten into the flow of things. Around mid-morning, maybe 3 hours into the drive, I noticed a small silver car pull up beside me on the right. It wasn't anything unusual. Cars pass you all the time, but something about the woman in the passenger seat caught my eye. She had her hair tied in a tight bun, like that head teacher from Matilda. What's her name? Miss Trunchbull. That's how I've always described it since. The bun was dead tight, like it had been wound up and pinned with military precision. But that wasn't what bothered me. It was her face. She was staring straight at me, not like a casual glance or even an annoyed driver kind of look. She was wide-eyed, pale, and tense, like something was horribly wrong. Her eyes were locked onto mine, and her mouth was slightly open. It looked like she was trying to say something, but couldn't. I only saw her for a few seconds before the car took the next exit and disappeared. The driver, a middle-aged man with dark hair and sunglasses, didn't look at me at all. I kept driving. At first, I just brushed it off. I've seen couples arguing in cars before. Maybe it was just a bad fight. Maybe she wanted help and didn't know how to ask. Maybe she was just staring off into space and happened to look at me. But the look in her eyes, it wasn't blank or dazed. It was sharp, intense. It was like she was trying to communicate something she couldn't say out loud. I kept going for another 30 or 40 minutes. The road was mostly clear, and I was cruising comfortably when another car pulled up beside me. A different car this time, blue this time, a hatchback. But my stomach dropped the moment I saw her. Same woman, same bun, same expression. Only the driver was different, a younger guy, maybe in his 20s with a beard. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I stared for a moment, trying to make sense of it, but the woman didn't change her expression. She kept looking right at me, eyes wide and pleading. It made no sense. Different car, different driver, same woman. Before I could react, they sped up and vanished down the road. That's when I started to get genuinely nervous. I told myself I'd stop at the next services and report it. Even if it was a misunderstanding, better safe than sorry. But the thing is, by the time I pulled into the next service station, maybe 15 minutes later, the car was gone. No sign of it. I couldn't even remember the plates. I stood there at the pumps for a minute, trying to calm down. Thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? I saw the same woman in 2 different cars making weird faces at me. It didn't feel like enough. I convinced myself it was some weird prank or coincidence and got back on the road. I didn't see her again for a long time. Nearly 4 hours passed. I was getting closer to London, tired now, just wanted to finish the drive. The traffic had picked up and I was more focused on keeping the lane and not getting cut off. It was just before dusk, that weird time when everything starts to look shadowy and your eyes play tricks on you. Then I saw it again. Another car, this time a dark green sedan, pulled up beside me, and she was there. Same exact woman, same bun, Same pale, terrified face. Except this time, she wasn't just staring, she was screaming. I couldn't hear her, obviously, but her mouth was wide open, her face contorted. She was slapping the window with her hands, pounding on the glass, and shouting something I couldn't make out. The driver, a bald man in a red jumper, kept his face forward like nothing was happening. I damn near lost control of the lorry. I pulled into the lobby on instinct, heart racing, and grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking as I dialed the police. I told them exactly what I'd seen. 3 different cars, same woman, same weird expression, now screaming. I didn't have license plates, just vague descriptions. I thought they'd brush me off, but they didn't. The woman on the line said, very calmly, that I wasn't the first person to call that evening. They'd received 3 other reports about a woman matching that description being seen in multiple vehicles along the M1 and M25 corridors. Same kind of behavior. No one had managed to get a plate. No one had seen the cars stop. She said they were looking into it. That was it. I sat in that lobby for a good 30 minutes before getting back on the road. I kept my eyes peeled the rest of the way. Every car that passed, every face that looked even slightly familiar, I watched them like a hawk. But I didn't see her again. I got to the depot just after 10 that night, offloaded my trailer, parked up, and sat in the cab for a long while before heading home. I didn't sleep well for days after that. I kept checking the news, looking online, trying to find something, anything about a missing person, a kidnapping, a carjacking. Nothing came up. Not a single story that matched. I even tried local London news outlets, but it was like it never happened. Eventually, I stopped looking. Life carried on. The route stayed the same. But every now and then, especially if I'm driving that same stretch of motorway, just as the sun's going down, I catch myself watching the cars beside me a little more closely than I used to. I don't know what I saw that day. Maybe it was some bizarre coincidence. Maybe it was a planned prank, some social experiment thing gone too far. Maybe it was something darker, something the police looked into quietly and never made public. I'll never know, but that woman's face, locked in terror, staring at me like I was her last hope, I'll never forget it. I was about 3 hours deep into North Dakota, running hotshot freight from Minnesota out to Montana. It was past 2 in the morning, and the roads were dead quiet. Just me, my truck, and endless flatland. The kind of flat that plays tricks on your mind. You look out your window, and it feels like you're driving on a giant dinner plate. No hills, no curves, just miles and miles of nothing in every direction. That night, I was hauling a high-priority tractor part for a big farm operation in Montana. Some gearbox component they needed by morning. I've been driving since late evening, taking only a couple quick stops to refuel and stretch. I've done runs like this before. Long nights, no sleep, running on black coffee and old country radio. I didn't mind. There's something peaceful about driving at night. Less traffic, less noise. Just the hum of the engine and the occasional sign glowing in your high beams. But around that hour, I could feel the highway hypnosis starting to kick in. If you've never experienced it, it's hard to explain. Your body keeps driving, but your mind starts drifting. You're staring at the same white lines, same road, same sky for so long that it all blends together. It's like your brain shuts off for a bit, but your hands keep the wheel straight. I've been through it before plenty of times, so I wasn't too worried. I kept sipping coffee, cracked the window to let the cold wind hit my face, and adjusted my seat just to stay alert. The road was as straight as a ruler, and the horizon looked like it had been cut with a knife. I could see way down the highway thanks to my brights. That's one good thing about driving in the plains. If something's up ahead, you'll spot a long time before you're close to it. But what I saw that night made me tighten my grip on the steering wheel. About half a mile up, there was something stretched across my lane. At first, I figured it was some truck tire debris. Happens all the time. Some semi blows a retread and the rubber gets left behind. But this looked longer, thinner, darker. I eased off the gas and hovered my foot over the brake. I flipped off the radio so I could focus. As I got closer, I squinted through the windshield trying to make out what it was. The shape started to look strange, like it wasn't a single object, but 2 shapes. My heart rate ticked up a bit. Another few hundred feet, and I realized what I was looking at. Two people. They were lying head to toe, perfectly aligned across the whole lane. No movement, arms at their sides, just lying there like it was a damn picnic blanket. It caught me so off guard, I almost didn't react in time. I swerve into the opposite lane, check for headlights, none for miles, and brake hard. My truck came to a near stop just ahead of where they were. I sat there in the middle of the road, engine idling, hazard lights on. I looked at my mirrors. Nothing moved. I didn't flinch, didn't sit up, didn't wave or try to crawl. Just two bodies flat on the pavement like they'd been painted there. I sat there for maybe 15 seconds, thinking through my next move. Part of me was about to throw it in reverse and go check if they were okay. I mean, what if they were hurt? Maybe an accident? Maybe they were high? I don't know. But just as I grabbed the shifter, something clicked in my head. I remembered a story an old-timer told me years ago. We were parked outside a diner during a snowstorm, just talking about the craziest stuff we'd seen on the road. He was one of those weathered, long-bearded guys who'd been driving since the 70s. He told me to always be careful in remote stretches of road, especially at night. He said sometimes people will lie in the middle of the road, pretending to be unconscious or dead, just to bait a good Samaritan. When the driver stops and gets out to help, others come out from the bushes or ditches nearby and jump him, beat him, steal his truck, take the cargo, leave him stranded in the middle of nowhere. He said it was rare, but it happened, especially when someone's hauling something valuable. I looked at the mirror again. Still no movement. Still just two figures lying flat. It was too perfect, too calm. If they were hurt or scared, they'd at least try to wave, or crawl, or sit up, something. So I made my decision. I wasn't going to get out. I slipped the truck back into gear and slowly began to roll forward. Not toward them, just straight ahead. I figured if they were really in need, they'd wave or call out or show some sign of life. But instead, just as my brake lights disappeared from their view and I started to accelerate, both of them sat up. I watched in the side mirror. They didn't chase or yell. They didn't try to stop me. They just calmly got to their feet and walked off to the side of the road, like they had just finished some casual lying down exercise. One of them turned their head and looked in my direction, but there was no panic, no rush, just slow, deliberate movement, like they knew I'd seen through it. The whole thing made my skin crawl. I kept driving for another hour before I even turned the radio back on. I didn't stop, not to pee, not to check the load, not to stretch. I kept one hand on the wheel, one hand on my coffee, and my eyes peeled for anything that looked off. Eventually, I got enough cell signal to call the local sheriff's office, told them what I saw, gave them a rough location using the nearest mile marker I could remember. The dispatcher said they'd send someone to check it out. I doubt anything came of it. That stretch of highway was so empty and remote, they probably wouldn't find a single footprint. By the time I made it to the Montana farm, the sun was rising and I could finally feel my muscles relax. Delivered the part, signed the paperwork. The farmer handed me a coffee and asked if the roads had been clear. I just nodded and said, yeah, pretty quiet night. But that image, those two people lying in perfect stillness across the lane, then standing up like they had all the time in the world, that stuck with me. Still does. I've driven that route a dozen times since, and I never saw anything like it again. But I always slow down now. Always skim both sides of the road. Always trust that gut feeling. That night reminded me that the scariest part of being out there on those long, empty roads isn't the animals or the weather. It's the people. I've seen a lot out here on the road. Fistfights at truck stops, rookies sideswiping other trucks, old-timers arguing over CB radios like children. When you're out here long enough, things stop surprising you. You learn to expect nonsense in places that are already worn thin with tension, long hours, and too much caffeine. But nothing tops the day I stopped at a truck stop in Arizona, somewhere between Flagstaff and the California state line. That day was one for the books. Me and this co-driver had already been at each other's throats for most of the trip back. At first, we thought we could tolerate each other, split the driving hours, keep the wheels turning, and make good time. But within a few days, we both realized we were completely incompatible. He left trash everywhere, talked too much during my sleep hours, and couldn't back into a dock to save his life. By the time we hit Arizona, we were both fed up. We rolled into the truck stop around midnight. The lot was packed. Had to snake through rows of parked trucks just to get up to the fuel island. I waited what felt like forever before I finally got a spot. I pulled up, fueled, and told them I was going to take a dump and grab a drink. I was drained and starving. I wasn't in the mood for any more arguments. I just wanted a few minutes of peace in that disgusting truck stop bathroom. Inside, the tile was cracked, the air smelled like piss and fryer grease, and the drink cooler made a buzzing noise like a dying fly. I grabbed a couple of Gatorades, a sandwich that looked 3 days past its prime, and a small bag of beef jerky. Took my time in the restroom because honestly, I didn't want to go back to that cab. When I finally walked back to the truck, I noticed the sleeper curtain was open and he was gone. Just vanished. No note, no heads up, just up and left. Fine by me, I thought. Gave me some quiet at least. I sat there for about 30, maybe 45 minutes. No sign of him. So I started doing some tidying up. There was this pile of trash he left from his last shift. Empty Red Bull cans, sandwich wrappers, even a half-eaten burrito in a plastic bag that stank like it had been cooking on the dash all afternoon. I'd had enough. I bagged everything up into 2 plastic bags, tied them off, and dropped them onto the floor by the passenger side. Eventually, he came sauntering back, looking like he just had a 3-course meal and a massage. He opened the passenger side door, saw the bags of trash, and without saying a word, just dumped them out onto the concrete right there at the pump. Didn't even blink. That was it for me. I lost it. I got out and tore into him. Not with fists, but with every curse word and insult I had in me. Told him he was a slob, a lazy piece of shit, and that I was done tolerating his garbage. Literally and figuratively. I didn't care if we were parked in front of a dozen other drivers waiting to fuel. I picked up the bags, walked the 20 feet to the trash cans, and slammed them in. There were 2 cans side by side, empty. It would have taken him all of 10 seconds to do what I just did. While I got back to the truck, I sat in the driver's seat, still fuming, and started filling out my logbook. I looked up at the mirror, trying to cool off, when I noticed 2 drivers about 3 trucks down from me. They were standing face to face, arms flapping like they were warming up for a boxing match. You could feel the tension even from that distance. I kept watching. One of them lunged, then the other, and suddenly fists were flying. But it wasn't a clean fight. They were missing more than they were landing. Swinging wild, stumbling over their own boots. One of them, a heavy-set guy in a sleeveless shirt, picked up a full metal trash can and hurled it like a shot put. It nailed the other guy square in the face. The lid flew off and paper towels exploded everywhere. Looked like someone detonated a confetti bomb at a janitor's funeral. By this point, I was halfway out of the truck. I wasn't going to jump in and stop it. I've learned better than to get involved, but hell, I wasn't going to miss the show either. I started walking over and noticed just about every other driver on the line had the same idea. A whole crowd started forming, half of them holding coffees or Gatorades, some with phones out, everyone watching. The guy who took the trash can to the face staggered back to his rig, opened a side compartment, and pulled out this massive chain with a padlock hooked on the end. It looked like something you'd anchor a boat with. He came stomping back like a man on a mission. No hesitation, just pure rage. He started swinging the thing like a medieval flail. First, he took out the trash canner's fuel pump hose, then shattered the driver's side window, then the side mirror. He dragged that chain down the fender and left a foot-long gouge that probably went through the paint, the metal, and half the man's soul. The whole time, he was roaring like an animal. The trash can guy ran to the other side of the pump and grabbed the only thing within reach, a squeegee. He tried to fight back with that, swinging it like a sword. But all it did was spray water on the chain guy's chest, and that just made him angrier. Now it looked like some demented sword fight with a chain and a windshield washer going at it like it was Thunderdome. Eventually, after a few minutes of this madness, they both realized their weapons were doing more damage to the trucks than to each other. So they dropped everything, lunged at each other, and just bear hugged like 2 bulls in a pen. They dropped to the ground in this awkward tangle, rolling around, kicking at each other's shins like toddlers fighting over a toy. Their legs were flailing, arms wrapped around each other, red faces pressed together. It was one of the dumbest, most ridiculous fights I'd ever seen. I shook my head and walked back inside the truck stop. Behind the counter was a woman in her 50s. Looked like she'd been working truck stops since the 80s. I told her there was a fight out on the fuel line. She didn't ask for details. She just dropped what she was doing and marched out there like a school principal heading to the playground. I stood near the doorway and watched as she stormed into the middle of that chaos and somehow got them to break apart. She didn't yell, didn't touch them, just stood there, hands on hips, glaring. And like magic, they stopped. Later, I heard from another driver that the whole thing started because one of the guys supposedly said something to the other guy's wife. From what I was told, she walked up and started throwing words first, and the guy she was yelling at said something back. Maybe sarcastic, maybe rude. Either way, it snowballed into this whole mess. Between the broken window, the trash fuel pump, the gouged up fender, and the bruises both of them took home, I imagine it cost each of them a few $1,000s and a good chunk of pride. I got back in the truck, still shaking my head, and got us rolling west. My co-driver didn't say a word after that. He must have known he pushed the last button. We made it to California without another incident, but the partnership was over. I dropped him off at a terminal and never saw him again. Not that I ever wanted to. There's a weird kind of lawlessness that brews in truck stops late at night. Long hours, hot tempers, poor hygiene, and too much time in a confined space. It creates the perfect storm. I don't follow FedEx trucks anymore either. Used to be fun riding with them, hammering down I-40 at 75 miles per hour, running 2 truck drag races in the dead of night. But those days are mostly gone. They slowed down, or maybe I just stopped caring. Out here, the stories never stop. You think you've seen it all, then something like a trash can to the face and a chain fight reminds you. Nah, the road still got more to show. It was just another early morning trash run through one of the rural back roads in the county. We weren't completely off-grid, but far enough from a main road that you didn't get much traffic unless someone lived out here or was seriously lost. The sun was barely creeping up, sky still that soft gray-blue with mist hanging low over the fields. It was one of those quiet mornings where the air smelled like wet earth and burnt diesel, and the only sound you heard was gravel crunching under the truck tires and the low hum of the compactor. I was driving the trash truck that day. My co-worker, Tony, was riding in the back, hopping off at each stop to grab the cans and haul them up. He was fast and didn't complain much, which I appreciated. We had maybe 15 more stops to go on the route, all spread out on long gravel driveways and barely paved roads. We'd already passed a few farms, a shuttered-up mobile home, and an old shed someone had half burned down years ago and just left there. Nobody ever fixed stuff out here. They just let it rot and collapse and act like it was never there. We just pulled up to the next stop, a wide gravel turnout in front of a 2-story house that looked like it hadn't been painted in 10 years. The place was quiet. No lights on, no dogs barking. Tony jumped off, grabbed the can, and was wheeling it toward the lift when I saw a truck slowing down behind us in the mirror. I didn't think much of it. Happens sometimes. People don't want to pass a garbage truck on a narrow road. But then the pickup stopped completely. Close enough, I could see its headlights shining against the back of her truck. At first, I thought maybe they were just waiting. Then the door opened. A woman got out. She looked young, maybe mid-20s. She was wearing light blue scrubs, the kind nurses wear. Her clothes were soaked in blood. Not just a little smear or stain, it was everywhere. Front, sleeves, even down her legs. Looked like someone had thrown a bucket of blood at her. It had dried in some places, but still looked fresh on others. She didn't run up or act frantic. She just walked up slowly to my window, which I rolled down halfway. I wasn't sure what to think. Her face was calm, blank almost, like she was asking about a lost dog or where the nearest gas station was. She asked for directions to Lake Jack Nolan. I hesitated a second, mostly because I was staring at the blood and trying to figure out what the hell I was looking at. Then I told her how to get there. I've been out that way before, just a narrow lake a few miles from the old quarry road. No signs, just a couple muddy pull-offs people use for fishing or dumping broken TVs and tires. You had to know it was there to even look for it. She thanked me, turned around, and walked back to her truck. That was it. No emotion, no follow-up questions. She didn't say who she was or why she needed to go there. She just got back in her truck, put it in drive, and rolled past us down the road. As she passed, I got a better look at her vehicle. Clean, newer model. A Ford. Silver. No dents, no rust. The windows were tinted but not blacked out. Inside looked normal from what I could see, except for a blue tarp folded up on the passenger seat. The bed of the truck had nothing in it, not even a rope or a toolbox. Just a wide, empty space. When she was gone, Tony climbed back up in the cab and shut the door. He asked what that was all about. I told him she was asking for directions. He glanced at the blood smeared all over the side mirror and said, "Jesus, you sure she didn't just kill someone?" We laughed it off. You joke like that when something feels off, but you don't really want to dig too deep into it. I told him she said she was going to clean up a deer that had been hit by a truck, but that didn't add up. She wasn't with animal control. She didn't have gloves or tools, or even the kind of build that made sense for dragging a deer carcass around. Hell, she probably weighed 110 pounds soaking wet. And who sends a single woman out in the middle of nowhere, in scrubs, to pick up roadkill? The whole thing just felt wrong, but we didn't do anything about it. That's the part that stuck with me. We just kept driving. The next couple stops were quiet. Both were long driveways that went way back into tree lines. Nobody came out. Nothing else passed us. Just birds and cows and a light breeze. But I kept thinking about that woman, about how calm she was, how she never once explained blood, never said who sent her, never even hesitated to speak. It was like she'd practiced it all ahead of time. When we hit the halfway point of the route, we pulled into the gas station at the edge of town. Small place, just 2 pumps and a little shop. I grabbed a coffee and went in to take a piss. Tony stayed outside, talking to the clerk who usually came out for a smoke around then. When I came out, Tony waved me over. He said, "Hey man, you're gonna want to hear this." The clerk looked at me and said someone else had just been in there maybe 15 minutes before us, asking the same thing, how to get to Lake Jack Nolan. Same kind of story. Said she was supposed to clean up a deer that got hit. She was covered in blood. Different truck though. This one was dark red, an older Dodge. Same tarp on the seat, same empty bed. The way he described her, it wasn't the same woman. This one had short hair. Taillé. Sounded older too, but the story was the same word for word. Looking for Lake Jack Nolan. Need to clean up a deer someone hit. Now that started to feel like something more than weird. We wrapped up the route by noon and drove back to the lot. All I could think about was that lake. I'd only been there once, and it was the kind of place you only went if you didn't want to be found. No cell service, no patrols, just water and trees and old tire tracks in the mud. I didn't sleep well that night. The next day, out of curiosity or maybe guilt, I drove back out to the lake. I didn't even tell Tony. I just filled up my truck, grabbed a flashlight, and headed out around 5 p.m. Took the turnoff and followed the rutted dirt trail until I hit the tree line near the shore. There were fresh tracks in the mud. A couple different tread marks. One looked like it matched the Ford from the day before. Another looked older, deeper, like someone had stayed longer. I walked around the lake's edge, keeping close to the brush. At the far side, behind a patch of thick trees and ferns, I found something. A blood trail. It wasn't just a few drops. It was a drag mark, wide and dark, cutting through the grass and mud and disappearing into a low patch of undergrowth. I followed it. The smell hit me first, wet copper, rot, maybe gasoline. My stomach turned, but I didn't find a deer. What I found was a garbage bag. Heavy-duty contractor bag, tied off. The plastic was stretched and wet, and flies were all over it. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The shape alone was enough. Human-sized, and behind it, tucked under a fallen log, was a second one. Smaller, lighter. I backed up slowly, trying not to make a sound. I didn't call the cops right then. I waited until I got back to the main road. And even then, I kept it vague. I said I found something suspicious near the lake. They sent a deputy out that night. They never said what they found. But a week later, the county put up a barrier on the trail leading to the lake. Big metal gate, padlocked shut. No trespassing signs. They didn't do that for deer. I still drive those routes. Still pick up trash from those same stops. But it never gave directions to anyone again. Not out there. Not after that. I've been driving trucks since I was 22. Started off running small routes up and down the East Coast. then slowly moved into long hauls. Most nights on the road are uneventful. Just a lot of darkness, engine noise, and the occasional roadside diner coffee to keep me awake. I've seen wrecks, drunk drivers, and weird stuff at truck stops, but one night in Nebraska made me rethink everything I thought I knew about being on the road. This was about 3 years ago. I was hauling a load of construction equipment from Kansas City up to Rapid City. It was late September, one of those weeks where the weather couldn't decide what it wanted to be. I left late afternoon and planned to stop halfway for a nap in the cab before pushing through to South Dakota. My rig was in good shape, trailer was sealed, everything checked out. The first leg of the drive was fine. A little boring, long stretches of open highway, a few scattered lights in the distance that were probably farmhouses. Once the sun dipped below the horizon, it got dark fast. Nebraska doesn't have a lot of cities. Out there it's just two-lane highways, cornfields, wind, and flatlands stretching into black nothing. Around 11 p.m., I was about 30 miles south of a small town called Alliance. I was getting tired, but I figured I'd drive a bit more before pulling over. The road was empty, hadn't seen another car for at least half an hour. The only light came from my high beams and the occasional reflective road sign. I was sipping lukewarm coffee from my thermos when I noticed something ahead, off to the right side of the road. At first, I thought it was a deer, but as I got closer, it looked like a vehicle. A small pickup truck parked on the gravel shoulder, tilted a bit like the right wheels were in the ditch. Hazard lights weren't on. No lights at all, actually. I slowed down out of instinct, scanning the area. The truck looked old, maybe a late 80s model. Rust along the sides, flat rear tire. Driver's door was wide open. I didn't see anyone. I wasn't about to stop. I've heard too many stories from other drivers about staged breakdowns used to lure people in. Still, I slowed just enough to get a better look as I passed. No one inside. No movement. No flashlight beams. No phone lights. Nothing. Just a truck and the cold wind pushing against my trailer. I kept driving, shaking it off. But 10 minutes later, I saw something else. It was another vehicle. This time a sedan, also off to the right. Same thing. Dark, hazards off, no interior lights. This one had both front doors open. Again, no one in sight. And the weirdest part was, this one also had a flat tire. Front right side. I slowed down again, squinting into the darkness. It didn't look like a crash. No broken glass, no skid marks, no debris. Just abandoned. At this point, I was wide awake. Every nerve in my body was on edge. It's not unusual to see a car on the side of the road. But two vehicles, same side, similar condition, same type of tire damage, that close together, in the middle of nowhere, something felt wrong. I kept going. My hands were tight on the wheel. I turned off the radio and just listened to the sound of the tires on the road and the low hum of the engine. The wind outside had picked up. It made that high-pitched whistle as it slipped through the edges of the cab windows. About 5 minutes later, I saw movement. This time it wasn't a vehicle. It was a person. They were standing on the left side of the road, facing the highway, right near the edge of the ditch. No flashlight, no reflective gear, just standing there in the dark. I couldn't see their face clearly, but I caught a glimpse of something pale, skin maybe. They didn't move when my headlights hit them. Didn't flinch, didn't wave, didn't step back. Just stood there. I swerved slightly to the right, instinctively trying to give them space, even though they weren't in the road. I glanced in the rearview mirror as I passed. Nothing, just darkness. My trailer rattled from a gust of wind, and the sound jolted me. I looked ahead and kept my foot on the gas. I was done with this stretch. I checked the GPS. The next truck stop was still 20 miles out. I told myself to keep going, don't stop, don't overthink it. Then I saw the third vehicle. It was a white panel van. Rear doors open. No lights. No people. Left side flat tire this time. Something was off with the way it was parked, angled across part of the shoulder, like it had just come to a stop mid-turn. There were marks in the gravel. Not quite tire tracks, more like something had been dragged. I didn't slow down this time. I sped up. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to look closer. I was doing almost 80 in a 65 by now, just trying to get to the damn truck stop. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone on the road anymore. My mirrors showed nothing. The CB radio was dead quiet. Then about 2 miles from the truck stop, I saw headlights behind me. Small, maybe a sedan. I hadn't seen a car in almost an hour. I watched it for a while in the mirror. It stayed behind me, maybe 300 feet back. Not tailgating, not flashing lights. Just there. At first I thought it was a relief. Someone else out here. Maybe I was overthinking everything. But then I realized this car had its lights on, but no reflection showed on the road. No shine, no bounce, like it wasn't actually there. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, the lights were gone. When I finally pulled into the truck stop, I parked way in the back, near the fence. I shut off the engine and just sat there in the cab for a while, heart pounding. I didn't get out. I didn't go inside. I didn't even check the trailer. I stayed awake until sunrise, windows cracked, doors locked. When the sun came up, everything looked normal. Other drivers were fueling up, grabbing breakfast, talking on phones. I walked around my rig. Everything looked fine. No damage, no tampering. I walked over to another driver, someone I'd seen a few times before at different stops. I asked if he came through the same highway stretch during the night. He shook his head, said he came in from a different route. I didn't bring up what I saw. Later, I checked the route again on my map. No reports of accidents, no stalled vehicles logged, no police reports. Nothing. But I know what I saw. Those weren't wrecks. Those weren't ghost stories or hallucinations. That was real. Those vehicles were real. That person standing there was real. But whatever happened on that road, I don't think I was supposed to see it. After that trip, I changed my routing preferences to avoid that stretch of highway. I've been driving a long time, and I've never seen anything like that again. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm out on a dark road with no lights around, I still think about it. I keep one hand close to the cab light switch. I watch the mirrors a little too often. And I never, ever stop for broken down vehicles at night anymore.